Our final best ball breakfast without the NFL schedule. A week from now, we will be talking about our week 17 bringbacks and maybe even our week 16 bringbacks. But today, the show must go on. I'll be ripping a solo Best Ball Mania 5 team. Then we'll, of course, have Shawn Siegele from Rotoviz swinging by for the Best Ball Banana Stand. And then Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside to do a draft. A full jam-packed morning of drafting here on Underdog. It's a great day to be great, as Ian Harditz would say. Let's do it.
My slow draft rooms are so much different than my streamed drafts.
Does no one realize Underdog's half-point PPR? Idiots!
Damn, bro. You know ball. Hope you guys packed your bags. I packed my bags. No, I mean, I literally packed my bags.
Dude, Star Method's legit. Only way to max out every contest in a plus EV way.
Week 17, you still gotta get there, bro.
We have a finite sample. We only have so much samples. Is it negative EV to stream all your drafts?
We just don't know.
Man, watching that intro reminds me, it's always a great time of year. And because I did something earlier this year than I've ever done in the best ball season, which I guess is kind of a theme for best ball this year. Everything has been earlier than it was in previous years. But I opened up my document for the 2024 Best Ball Bros video. You know, normally it takes until like June and July, some of the lines, the sayings, the metas to really crystallize of what can we parody this year. But we've had so much best ball content already that I felt it was time to get the Google Doc going, get the ideas flowing. So maybe this year we'll even get the updated Best Ball Bros video earlier because there's already so much to work with. GM, everyone, when is the schedule? I know, I believe, is it Wednesday or Thursday night? I believe it's Thursday night, right? I think that is has been confirmed. So yes, it'll be a fun few days after getting that schedule release. I know some of you have been exhibiting great patience with not drafting as you wait for the schedule. I do think there's certainly merit to that. I think a lot of those early ADP values we were taking advantage of have now started to evaporate. You know, I see everyone talking about the Ben Sinnott ADP rise. He's probably one of the biggest guys, even guys like Tyrone Tracy, obviously Kamani Vidal, but it was even like that secondary wave of sleepers have now gotten pushed up. You know, I consider Tyrone Tracy as kind of part of that. So yeah, if you do want to chill for a few days and wait for the schedule, I think you are certainly justified in that. But I've been enjoying drafting. I actually did a couple drafts over the weekend, just a couple of puppy drafts, you know, scratch that itch when I was out doing some cardio club stuff. So yeah, I always like to be drafting, but there is definitely an edge if you can have that patience. And I should mention here right at the top, with the schedule getting dropped later this week, I put together one of my favorite videos that I've done on the channel in a long time, on the Deposit Kingdom channel, looking at how the structure for Best Ball Mania 5 should impact which week we are prioritizing, which week we are essentially trying to focus our game stacks around to give us the best edge in the Best Ball Mania 5 structure. Of course, in previous years, week 17 was famously the only week that matters, but the flatter payouts in Best Ball Mania 5 tilt the math in a way that it makes week 16 more important than it has ever been. And some would argue making it the most important week this year. So I did a whole video overviewing where this math is coming from, how the contest is structured, and then provided how I'm going to apply this specifically to my drafts with some concrete, actionable takeaways. There is a decent amount of math, EV, win rate, all of that good stuff, but got some good feedback on the video. If you guys enjoy the concepts and like thinking through game theory for these big, large field tournaments, I highly recommend checking out that video over on the Deposit Kingdom channel. We, of course, have weekly videos that are getting posted over there. The live streams will always exist here on the Pete Overzet live stream channel, but all of the strategy videos, pre-recorded stuff, highly produced, that will always live on the Deposit Kingdom channel. I think I have the most recent video pinned in the chat here, but highly recommend you guys get subscribed over there. Really excited to put a lot of focus in those evergreen videos. I think they are bringing a lot of value. They will never come at the expense of the live streams, but just something I'm excited to prioritize this year. So definitely, if you can, toss me a sub over there. as we work on growing that channel. All right, I need to pour some coffee here. 10:05 a.m. Eastern. Certainly in need of it. Had a busy Mother's Day weekend, lots of festivities. It was also my mother-in-law's birthday, so we had multiple events and gatherings and all of that good stuff. So yeah, not a ton of relaxing and resting over the weekend. So we're going to need our coffee this morning to fuel us and power these teams. I will wait your scores here for the coffee pour. Some of you guys are very tough graders. AJ talking about the schedule. Eagles Packers on Friday, kind of wild. Yeah, that one was announced a little bit. That's going to be in Brazil, which is even more wild. Yeah, it's going to be fun. For those of you who go out and do live drafts, normally with the Ship Chasing crew, we're out in Vegas doing drafts. And the way those generally work is you can do drafts after or on various days. You could do them before the Thursday night game. You could do it on Friday. You can do them on Saturday, Sunday, once some of the games have already happened. So now we have an additional game and you draft with that knowledge in mind. So like an example last year was Lions Chiefs. And, I believe it was like Kelsey had a down game. Even Jahmyr Gibbs had a down game. So you're getting like these interesting values. This year, we're going to have a second game there. So if you're drafting on Saturday, you're going to have Eagles, Packers data points impacting drafts. You're going to have Chiefs, Ravens. That's going to be on the opening night. I think I already saw Nomar in the Ship Chasing Discord this morning saying that, Xavier Worthy could realistically go in the second round if he has a big game on week one, because you get to bank those points. So it becomes both a knowledge thing of like, hey, how are these rookies being utilized? And then also an additional edge of I can just win my week one matchup by taking this guy who scored a ton of points. So yeah, we're going to have a ton of, ramifications to multiple games being played this year. Let's see here. GM, solid pour. Nice ring at the end. 8.5, 7.85, 7.2. Wow, Benjamin with the 10 of 10. So I don't know why this is disturbing. Seemed like a deeper pour, honestly. Wow, Chunk the Deuce. Thank you very much. Nolan saying underdog filling the 5,600 single entry tournament before the schedule release is insane. It's grown so much in the last 2 years. Yeah. What was that? The Poodle? What was it called? No, the Golden. The Golden. Yeah, that one. We drafted that on Off and On the Clock the other day. And that was a fun time as well. Hoping Underdog continues to kind of give us a steady stream of the single entry contests, because I think those are fun too. You don't have to worry about the 150 max. There's just another wrinkle there. We got Bindles in the chat. Love the Best Ball After Dark with Ray G. Appreciate that, Bindles. For you guys who aren't aware, I do a couple premium shows for the YouTube members. Generally, they are on Friday and Saturday nights. It's called Best Ball After Dark. Sometimes we just chop it up for the full hour, like I did with Ray G, who does awesome content over at Destination Devi. And there were lots of questions in the comments from how to make it as a content creator, etc. And Ray G had lots of good advice on that. And then we also talked best ball, because even though he's a bit of a dynasty guy, he's been getting very much into playing best ball, and he's excited to 150 max this year. So highly recommend that show. And then I actually did a second one this weekend on Saturday night with RotoViz's Michael Dubner. He is someone who has helped me out with a ton of the videos on the Deposit Kingdom channel. And so that was really fun to get to do a draft with him. We talked for about 40-45 minutes and then did a draft. So if you guys are YouTube members, you can always get access to that. That is the Best Ball Value Hounds tier. And then that can also get you access to the Discord. There is a Best Ball Breakfast Discord within the Deposit Kingdom. That's a private channel for those YouTube members. And then you can get tipped off when I am hopping in drafts, which I know some of you like to be able to get into the drafts with me. That's a good way to do that. All right, let's see here. Benjamin May, new YouTube member. Welcome, welcome. What is up, Hoosiers? Chris says, I crushed the Poodle drafting right beside Overzet. Pete stays in his lane. There you go. Put it on my tombstone. Here lies Pete. He stayed in his lane. Speaking of tipping people off, I did just let you guys know in there that I was hopping in a draft. It looked like there was 6 or 7 spots available. So it looks like we did get some friends and family in here. Beef Spurf, of course. My guy TM Longacre, a top 5. Best Ball Mania, 4 finalists. We got Star Kindler. Should be a fun draft here on Best Ball Breakfast. And as always, Shawn Siegele will be joining in a little bit at 11, Pat Kerrane at noon, a full morning of drafting here. We got the 110 here today. I just started looking at some of my exposures. I didn't really care for the first, sets of drafts. I think I've done like 17 or 18 Best Ball Mania drafts now. I think I can go look. How many have I done? 18 Best Ball Manias, 1 golden, 2 puppies, 1 mini schnauzer, but started looking at those exposures and now feel like we are going to enter kind of that second window of drafting once we have the schedule. This first window to me was all about attacking those mispriced ADP values, loaded up on a lot of Ben Sinnott, a ton of Jayden Daniels. I think Jayden Daniels is my most drafted player overall, not just at quarterback right now. And, he's moved up at least a round and a half since that Best Ball Mania opening ADP. But it'll be fun to see how the schedule impacts ADP, because we know so many people will be correlating that there will be a decent amount of ADP maneuvering. You'll often see some pass catchers get pushed up a little bit if people are trying to prioritize specific stacks. So always fun to have different types of things, dare I say, flip the draft board on its head there. All right. See if we got anything crazy going on here. Man, I think this happened in my draft with Dubner over the weekend where Amon-Ra St. Brown went really high. He goes 4 here, ahead of Chase, ahead of Jefferson, ahead of Bijan and Brees. I pick at 1-9. I was in this spot, I think, with Sean last week, and I think we went Garrett Wilson. I think I like Garrett Wilson maybe a smidge more too, but if I'm always going to be drafting Garrett Wilson over these guys, would I draft with Gretsch? Would I draft with Sean? We'll go ahead and play it by ADP and grab Puka Nacua here with my first pick. Marvin Harrison Jr., still a fixture of the 1-2 turn here. You can't buy Marvin Harrison Jr.'s jersey right now. Did you guys know that? You can't buy his jersey. Let's see here. We do see Drake London go off the board. This is certainly one of those avalanche type rooms. Last week, I did kind of get buried in an avalanche a little bit. I think I maybe semi-recovered. I'm not going to mess around this week, though. We are just going to take one of these wide receivers. It's for Ayuk or Olave. I saw Davis Maddock post on Twitter that he has 0% Brandon Ayuk, so I need to fight back the culture war and take Brandon Ayuk here. Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk start. Thank you. OG1 here says, great show with Laird. Yeah, that was a fun time. If you guys missed that, I think it got posted later Friday afternoon, so it might have slipped through the cracks. But we did one of our regular check-ins with Patrick Laird. Had some fun reminiscing, legitimately blew all of our collective minds that it had been 6 years since the original Laird bit, the Laird week. He was a rookie then, and now he is entering his 6th year in the NFL. We had some of our book club stuff to catch up on. Also was talking about him returning to training camp. And then we also had a special treat because Bucks tight end and Laird's current roommate, Co Kieft, also dropped by. And so we talked with him for a while. Co Kieft was great. Super funny dude. So yeah, check out that video. If you want the audio, it's up on Davis's feed, the Takecast, and you can get the video edition on the YouTube channel. 2+ hours of chopping it up with Patrick Laird, who was also just absolutely roasting me and Davis right and left. If he doesn't get into coaching, if he doesn't get into politics, if he doesn't get into business, he could get into roasting fantasy football analysts for a living. Pretty good at that. Yeah, Jordan says, can our boy Co Keefe become a regular contributor? What a legend. Yeah, I think so. I noticed we got the follow from Co Keefe on Twitter. He's ready to mix it up with us. I think he could easily be a recurring guest as part of the Laird universe with us. We did also talk about this. We have circled on the calendar. John Warner says Dylan Laube, the Patrick Laird of the kids' generation. The Raiders play the Bucs this year in Tampa Bay. Davis, Laird, and myself have already made plans to all meet up in Tampa for that game, the Laube Laird Bowl. I think it sounds like a grand old time. So, we're going to be looking at the Week 17 matchups when the schedule comes out. I'm going to be looking to see when is this Tampa Bay Las Vegas Raiders game. That is one I am going to be circling here. Mr. shouting out another video I did on the Deposit Kingdom channel last week, drafting back to front. Yeah, it was called How to Reverse Engineer Your Draft. Highly recommend that as an exercise. And I think it's a good exercise to refresh each time the board is getting flipped a bit, because even some of those targets that I was talking about now are much more expensive. So it's always reevaluating who are those guys you can get at the end of your draft. So I'm on the clock here at 3:10. By ADP, we have Derrick Henry, Josh Allen, Cooper Kupp, Jalen Hurts. I'm going to take Cooper Kupp. I already have Puka Nacua. I like getting both of those Rams wide receivers there and kind of seeing what the room will push me at 4-3. Are you going to get a really good running back discount? Do you want to take one of these quarterbacks? I did a puppy draft yesterday where I got Josh Allen at 4-3. I don't know if he might fall here. We see Tank Dell go, Josh Jacobs, T. Higgins. I mean, this is definitely an avalanche room. Trey McBride goes. Okay. Man, so this is a very, very similar spot that I was in yesterday in that puppy. I think I'm going to take Josh Allen in the 4th round. ADP of 32. I'm picking at 39. And I kind of like how Josh Allen pairs with the Rams wide receivers, just because I could certainly still get Stafford, but finding a quarterback there with some true ceiling breaking upside at a discount, I think I like that. So our team, we have Josh Allen at quarterback, 7 picks past ADP. Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk, and Cooper Kupp. But yeah, this is one of those stream draft rooms. We're definitely back to to being in the weird rooms that are not representative of quote unquote normal rooms. We do see a quarterback run come right after I take Josh Allen. Josh Allen 39, Lamar 40, Hurts 41. Clutch cow fighting the good fight. Goes Jahmyr Gibbs at 13 and Josh Jacobs at 36 from the 12 hole. Star Kindler going out and getting his guys. Travis Kelce at 38, knowing, hey, there's probably no way Trey McBride is coming back there. So if you want him, you got to go get him. Jay Chang giving me the sexy stamp of approval. Is Malachi Corley the new Puka? No, I mean, they couldn't be even more different as prospects. I mean, Puka Nacua earned targets at just an insane rate. And Malachi Corley was probably one of the worst target earners in this entire draft class. What you're getting with Malachi Corley is just yards after the catch stuff. You're hoping he's like Mecole, slightly better than Mecole Hardman. I think that's what you're hoping for when you select Malachi Corley, that they scheme him some stuff up around the goal line and then he gets it done after the catch. But to me, the yak isn't the Puka Nacua selling point. It's his yards per target, and looking at even yards per team target. I mean, Malachi Corley couldn't hold a candle to Puka there. Ooh, Robert Griffin. Rams Bills may play each other in either week 16 or 17. How many of you guys are going to go back after the schedule is released and tab through all of your big board entries, all of your early BBM5 entries, and see which week 16 and 17 correlations you stumbled upon organically? Do you know what I else just realized too? These are our final days, our final moments to hide from the bye week bros. They have been in hibernation, but they are coming for us. They are ready to emerge. They are ready to ridicule our teams. They are ready to say, aren't you worried that both your tight ends have the same bye week? Just enjoy these few days of peace and quiet, guys. I'm telling you, enjoy it. Post as many teams as you can in Discord, on X, texting it to your mom, however you share your teams, do it now. Because once those bye weeks are next to them, you are not safe. You are not safe from the bye week, bros. One of the most vicious sub communities within the best ball space there is, the best ball or the bye week bros. Brandon, bye week bros are like the cicada brood. They will emerge and begin to annoy the hell out of us. I can hear them buzzing. They're ready. They're ready. Roster baiting season is upon us. I mean, I'll tell you what, roster baiting season never ends. Roster baiting is now a year-round endeavor. All right, we are about to pick on the clock here. Yesterday, when I did my puppy draft, where I got Josh Allen in the 4th, I got Dalton Kincaid coming all the way back to me at 5'10". I knew that was not going to happen in this room. I am going to go ahead and take George Kittle here. It is ahead of ADP, but I have Brandon Ayuk. I like getting as many kind of team level bets as I can. And for me, George Kittle still represents the end of that elite tight end tier here. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop up George Kittle because none of these other selections here, I feel like I absolutely have to have. So I'll just see what comes back. And now through 5 rounds, we have our elite onesies, Josh Allen and George Kittle. And then we got our 3 wide receivers, Puka, Brandon Ayuk, and Cooper Kupp. All right, here we go. Apparently, everyone could play each other in week 16 and 17, including the Bills-Niners. I'm getting out my accidental crystal ball to correlate the hell out of this week. All right, we're back on the clock here. This is, man, are we going to get Rome falling because he popped up with a hamstring injury a little bit? I am going to grab, man, these picks right here. I don't think I can afford in this room another detour away from wide receiver. I'm going to grab my favorite of these 3, my personal favorite, Jordan Addison, as my 4th wide receiver here. The value on Rachaad White and Kenneth Walker, I guess Kenneth Walker is not a huge value. The value on Rachaad White sliding, 9 picks, 10 picks past ADP is kind of intriguing. But I also know what's coming. I know what is going to happen to this wide receiver room. And I also know when I pick at 82 and 87, I am going to love the running back selections there. So this is one of those already kind of wide receiver avalanche spots that I think you have to consider when you have a couple picks away from wide receiver early. And doing the 2v2s, because like the 2v2 would end up being like a Kenneth Walker and Christian Watson versus a Jordan Addison and a Zamir White. Like those are the kinds you're starting to look at there. And I lean heavily toward the latter in those 2v2s. But Rachaad White going at pick 67 to be Spurf, certainly can't complain about that. But you can just see here how many constructions we have that have multiple wide receivers through 6 rounds. Yeah, I mean, UTalk says, it's a good lesson to not always take the ADP value just because it's there. And it's also, being conscious of like what room you're in and is the room going to make you pay for taking that ADP value. I think this room would make me pay for scooping up Rachaad White ADP value. The other trick too, when you think through ADP value is, and I kind of talked about this in relation to the broken ADPs when Best Ball Mania opened, right? And how some of those ADPs were so broken that a guy could fall 20 picks past ADP and still be a bad value. And yet our underdog brains trick us. Holy shit, 20 picks past ADP. How is this not a screaming value? And it's like, well, the market hasn't gotten to an efficient place yet. I think you could argue with Rachaad White, he still needs to fall a little bit more to properly account for the Bucky Irving addition. I actually think Rachaad White is a really interesting player to discuss. There are lots of smart people who are on Rachaad White. I know JJ Zacharyson just wrote him up as one of his targets. And I think that's what's fun about some of these dead zone backs is you can spin it either way. You can say the competition isn't that strong. They've already exhibited bell cow-like qualities. And now you're getting even more of a discount because of the specter of an incoming rookie who might not even be that good. Or you can say these were already very fragile selections, fragile profiles that don't do any one thing in a really special way that is going to ensure that role for them this year, and we should be pushing them down the draft board. I think specifically with Rachaad White, I am more in the latter camp of worrying that Bucky Irving could eat into some of those high value touches, not in the passing game, but certainly around the goal line. And I do think if you get a committee situation there, you don't have what you have with a guy like Kenneth Walker, right? And we talked about this with Shawn Siegele last week when we selected Kenneth Walker, that you get to always fall back on the efficiency, on the explosiveness of Kenneth Walker, even if he's losing some touches to Zach Charbonnet. So we are on the clock here. We don't need to mess with any of these quarterbacks, but as I predicted, we're going to have some running backs here we knew we would like. Just making sure there's nothing here otherwise that jumps out. To me, this feels like either Ramondre. Yeah, I think Ramondre's the guy here. Ramondre falls a few picks past ADP. Ramondre kind of a forgotten man in that I don't see him discussed that much. It's kind of just a shrug your shoulders type of pick. But if we are projecting a boost in offensive efficiency for this offense, I start to get excited about Ramondre. Antonio Gibson has just never been able to command a significant share of a backfield. I don't even mind Antonio Gibson's price per se, but if we're thinking about backfields with ambiguity and we're looking at the backs who have demonstrated that they can function on all three downs, to me, Ramondre Stevenson still has a path to kind of return to a value more commensurate with where we were drafting him last year, which was often in the middle of the third round. Let's see here. I'm going to make my pick, and then we got a couple interesting questions in the chat we will hit here. This is the only issue sometimes with taking the quarterback value as well. As much as I like the Josh Allen stuff, is this could be a room where we get lots of quarterback fallers. And then you start to wonder, would I have preferred to have a different position there? So I think this is going to be a running back pick. Of course, Pat pushing Jaylen Warren to the top of the rankings. Najee, you know what? I think I'm going to IKB just a little bit here. I'm going to go with Jonathan Brooks. He's a guy that I want to continue to kind of load up on. Like my thesis being, I think Najee and Tony Pollard, their prices are going to chill out here for most of the summer. I don't see them being big risers. I don't see them being big fallers. Jonathan Brooks, I envision a steady climb up for his ADP. And I just want to be a little bit more aware of that and kind of prioritize him within this tier of 0 running back targets. So we had Jonathan Brooks. This is the team through 8 rounds. Josh Allen at quarterback, Ramondre and Jonathan Brooks at running back. Still only 4 wide receivers here. Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Jordan Addison, tight end George Kittle here. Yeah, I mean, this is a familiar sight to anyone who's been doing these drafts, is whether you're using rankings, whether you're using ADP, there will come a point in the draft where the only wide receiver you see in the queue is Christian Watson. Run good, Rick. Pete, what do you think about the 0 QB build until 16, 17, 18, where you can get massive running back wide receiver strength early and stack a Geno, Carr, May, Nix later? I think this is a fun question. Basically saying, how viable is late round QB in 2024? I would say in general, structurally, I think this is very viable. Just like in general drafting best ball teams, I think multiple structures can work. I say the same thing all the time. It's quantity or quality, not both. With late round quarterback, you are saying, hey, I do not have high quality quarterback, so I'm going to go with a high quantity. I need to get to 3. One of the other ancillary benefits of doing that is you do potentially set up multiple stacks for the playoff gauntlet. We already know how important week 16 is this year relative to week 17. In a perfect world, you could have 3 different stacks that are unique differentiators throughout the playoff gauntlet. So I just love that conceptually already about having 3 quarterbacks. The one thing I would say, and probably the one thing that people get tripped up on the most, is how do we think through structural strategies once they are mapped on the current ADP landscape for this year? And I would argue that this year's ADP landscape, as of right now, is not as conducive for late round quarterback as it was last year. Because even though there are some interesting names late, you have job security concerns. If you were to tell me with 100% certainty, Drake May is going to start 17 games, Daniel Jones is going to start 17 games, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, all of these guys are going to for sure start 17 games. I have higher degrees of confidence on those guys, individually. Some lower, some higher. But because of that, I think it makes it trickier to pull off. Like when you are running into legitimate job security or when do they start questions, you start to introduce a lot of potential zeros, aka dead roster spots. So I think late round quarterback could get potentially stronger as we get further into the season. We start to hear more about these situations. But say the 4 names you use, Geno, there is more bench risk there than there was last year now that they brought in Sam Howell. It still might not be a ton, but there is some. Carr, I feel good about starting the whole year. May, I don't necessarily. Nix, I think, but it's still up in the air. So I almost would want to treat some of these guys like we do running back 2s, where let's get a little bit more information before we kind of try to think through whether we want to push that specifically. All right, I am back on the clock at 106 here. Trey Benson went off the board. He would have been a fun, exciting rookie to pair here. I think I am going to grab another wide receiver. I'm going to go ahead and take Mike Williams by ADP, the only wide receiver in this range who's really that interesting to me. And I don't mind a few of these running backs. We now also have just a ton of potential quarterbacks to take. I'm not going to take Brock Bowers, even though I already have Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. I'll push him if he wants to come back to me, at 130, maybe we would consider it. But this is one of those spots where I want to set up a lot of different stacks. And I know I'm going to have a second stack with a quarterback. So I want to have secondary stacks without it. Like I can even now get Aaron Rodgers super late with Mike Williams and still have a Bill stack, a Jet stack, a Niner stack, a Ram stack. Let's see here. By ADP, we got the Washington backs here. Let's see. I think we can take another running back here in this sweet spot. Yeah, let's do Brian Robinson. Starkindler took Chase Brown, another guy we've been kind of debating. I feel like those two continue to kind of butt heads ADP-wise. Are you on team Brian Robinson? Are you on team Chase Brown? I do like Chase Brown more. He's one of my favorite clicks right now, but I am going to use rooms like this to kind of balance me out and make sure I get some Brian Robinson exposure here right at ADP. As a hockey expert, who do you think has a better chance to come back in their series? The Bruins or the Avalanche? The local team or the Heart? I mean, I haven't been closely following, but I have to say the Avalanche, my beloved Colorado Avalanche. Tyler, when we consider pushing quarterback, is it prudent to know their max squat so we know they can carry the heavy, dumpy load of the thin room? Exactly. Yeah, if you aren't checking out squat numbers for these quarterbacks, you're getting outworked. Did Carr just get an extension? Yeah, and I said that Derek Carr was one of the guys I do feel confident about starting all year. And coincidentally, he is one of my most drafted quarterbacks right now, which is kind of terrifying. But I basically ended up with a decent amount of Olave, a decent amount of Shaheed, a decent amount of Juwan Johnson. And then when you are trying to fill out a QB2 or a QB3, Derek Carr seems to always be at fairly palatable prices there. Chase Brown, 80%, 88% over here. I do like Chase Brown a lot. I do. Am I in Colorado? No, I live outside of Boston right now, but I grew up in Denver, Colorado. So there was that stretch there where we got back-to-back Denver Broncos championships, followed by a couple of Avalanche championships. That was the Patrick Waugh, Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic years. I had my Colorado Avalanche starters jacket. That was a fun time to be an Avs fan. Patrick Waugh was a legend. Who I always blank on his name. Who was the goalie for the Red Wings that he fought at center ice? That was also one of the best rivalries in sports for a while. The Avalanche and the Red Wings. Was it Osgood? Was that the Detroit goalie? That was awesome. All right, let's see what we got cooking up here at 11:10. We got a 1-3-5-1 build. So wow, this will be interesting if no one takes Brock here. This is one of those things where you really have to think through is, let's see, will Clutch Cow take Brock? Clutch Cow has Anthony Richardson, no San Francisco. I'm going to keep pushing Brock here. Let's see. Maybe we do, I'm trying to think if I wanted to try to get Pearsall with like a mega stack. I also don't mind Josh Downs. I'm going to grab Leggett. I prefer Leggett here. I'm really wrestling if I want to take this this ADP value with Purdy at this point. It's one of those spots where it's like, I still think through the 2v2s and knowing how many other options I have at quarterback. Obviously, Stafford completes a double stack. Aaron Rodgers, who we took at pick 200 plus in a ship chasing draft last week, you can get insane deals on. And I'm just like, Brock Purdy feels like a trap pick to me relative to how I've constructed this roster flexibility. But I now have gotten up to 6 wide receivers I feel good about. Certainly like Xavier Leggett types way more as a 6 wide receiver than a 4th. I kind of want to just like force the room to make me take Brock Purdy. I'm gonna make someone else take Brock Purdy for now. I'm gonna take Zach Charbonnet, another one of my favorite running back targets. Gets me up to 4 running backs in a 0 RB build. I think structurally, when I do the 2v2s, I am going to appreciate having kept quarterback as an option later and loading up on 2 picks I like here a lot more, Zach Charbonnet and Xavier Leggett. But an interesting decision, but I think one that I certainly appreciate having the flexibility, because there will be times where I'll look at my wide receiver room and be like, man, I don't know what other quarterback I really like as part of, helping me fulfill stacks. And again, I think the Brock Purdy and the Stafford stuff is one of the things that it's easy to fall into that trap of like, this is the most obvious stack, therefore I need to have it, but not understanding we can have 4 or 5 different stacks. And once we already have Josh Allen, we know we're going to be capped out at a second quarterback. So how can I get as many stacks as possible while still kind of navigating the ADP landscape correctly? For me, I think it is pushing quarterback even more. And then you also put someone in a weird spot, right? So Brock Purdy does go to the Deebo Samuel drafter. So he gets a nice value there. And I don't mind that, right? He has Jalen Hurts. Probably wasn't going to let Brock Purdy go by twice. But when I think about quarterbacks like Purdy, Stafford, who aren't going to bring a lot as far as on the ground, their ability to separate from Josh Allen, I'm really skeptical of. So it's like, I would just rather have the ceiling or get my access to those environments via the wide receivers. Why have I seen so much chatter about solo QB? Where did that start from? I saw so many people. It was one of those things where I saw people referencing the debate, but I never knew where the debate initially came from. but I've seen lots of solo QB stuff. I have never been a solo QB guy. My biggest thing against it is in these large field contests. I think it makes way more sense if you're doing it in one of those super small, high stakes stuff where you only have to advance like 1 of 4 or 1 of 6. But man, you are just going to get pummeled from an ownership standpoint. If you drag a solo QB out of the regular season, everyone in week 15 is going to have him. Okay, you drag him out of week 15, everyone's going to have him in week 16. Okay, you show up in the 539 person finals, you got there, you're going to be there with 60% other Josh Allen teams. And a lot of those other Josh Allen teams are going to have a unique differentiator. It just seems like too tough of a needle to thread, not to mention you're lowering your advance rate when you take the 0 at quarterback. I just think it's too gal brain for my tastes in these super large field tournaments. I'm definitely open to hearing arguments for it in super small field stuff, though. Yes, Fantasy Stock Exchange, just summing up my point in a more succinct sentence with how important advance rates are, plus having no uniqueness in playoff weeks. I don't get solo QB at all. But apparently that's all the rage in debates right now. Okay, we are going to continue to rip it in then on, I was not envisioning taking Ricky Pearsall here, but I kind of like this. We are going to grab Ricky Pearsall, 10 picks past ADP. These are maybe the kind of picks that I won't be quite as interested in making once we have the schedule, but I've been really leaning into as much team level correlation as I can get. And I also knew some of the draft, Star Kindler behind me only had 5 wide receivers. And I kind of like some of the other options here. This will be another thing of how much do we want to push Matthew Stafford. Aaron Rodgers does go. This might be the spot to take Matthew Stafford because I have pushed it a good bit. We could also always do like Bryce Young. If Jalen Wright was still on the board, I would certainly have taken him. I think at this point, we can grab Matthew Stafford almost 2 rounds past ADP. We can be done at quarterback. We've already made such a big investment. And I think I like this when I think through what ended up being kind of the 2v2 on the Brock Purdy, and then that allowing me to get Ricky Pearsall there. So now we have some big stacks. We have a big Ram stack. We have a big San Francisco stack. The only other thing that's kind of unfortunate about Josh Allen is it does become harder to get any Bills pieces. The Bills pieces just don't line up in a way where I ever think any of them are values outside of maybe Ray Davis, who did Ray Davis already go? I'm pretty sure he already went. Yeah. So this might be a naked Josh Allen team. Can go back and look and see where their places I should have considered the stack. But this then goes back to why I like the idea of having these secondary stacks where it's like, okay, Josh Allen is what hits my lineup, but it's the firepower from the Rams and the Niners that is hitting my flex spots, my running back, my wide receiver spots. Curtis Samuel always goes so much earlier than I'm comfortable with. Like Curtis Samuel went at 97. I'm not taking Curtis Samuel ahead of Jonathan Brooks. Khalil Shakur goes at pick 114. So I would have had to have passed on Brian Robinson there to get Khalil Shakur. I don't know. I mean, Khalil Shakur's fine, but I'm not going to force a stack for a player I don't feel super strongly about. Keon Coleman went 65. I would have had to have taken Keon Coleman ahead of Jordan Addison. I'm not doing that either. James Cook could have fit nicely with him, but I would have had to have taken, where did James Cook go in this draft? James Cook went at pick 54. So there was no chance to get him. He didn't come back. So this is, it doesn't line up that well with the Bills stuff. Dalton Kincaid didn't come back. I guess this team has Dawson Knox written all over it. Yeah, but Mike Williams for Shakir. I'm taking Mike Williams there. I don't know. Maybe that's bad. Maybe I'm not factoring in the correlation bump enough. But man, I feel so much stronger about Mike Williams' like range of outcomes and single week ceiling. I feel so much better about that relative to Shakir. Yeah, now we got Mac Hollins. People need to find God with these Buffalo pieces, shaping up to be 2022 KC rather than 2024. Yeah, and that's why it's like, I don't, I'm very pro stacking. I would even consider myself a stacking slappy, but I just am not going to force it if it doesn't line up well. All of the fun pieces, like Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman are the fun pieces. Those are extremely priced up. And then Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakur are the guys that I want to be able to get out of value, but they're super priced up too. Okay, this feels like a great spot to take Bucky Irving. I love when the drafts line up like this where you fade. We passed on Rachaad White, kind of for structural purposes, not to get buried by an avalanche. But then taking Bucky Irving, I love the idea of further compounding the leverage that you made earlier in the draft. So fade Rachaad White on this team, grab Bucky Irving. So we're now at a 2-5-7-1 build. We're in pretty good shape here as far as our structure. Done at quarterback, 7 wide receivers, 5 running backs, and we got 3 more picks. Not feeling shut out at any one position. Pretty good running back room for a 0 RB. Ramondre, Jonathan Brooks, Brian Robinson, Zach Charbonnet, Bucky Irving. Nice little blend of some early season touches there with Ramondre and Robinson. Some really good contingent value with Zach Charbonnet. A back who could be a playoff hammer in Jonathan Brooks. I think I will take Hunter Henry here. I have not selected a lot of Hunter Henry. I think he is a solid pick, and I think an even better pick when he slides 20 picks past ADP. So this seems like a good spot to grab Hunter Henry. He can be my steady Eddie while George Kittle is putting up those 3 for 30 weeks. And then Hunter Henry can give me a couple of those 5 for 50s in a tutty. Another guy there too, paired with Ramondre Stevenson, could be a beneficiary from a quarterback upgrade. Keith, man. I am going to have to select Keith in one draft this year. But yeah, now we're going to probably take one more running back. And then I think we can kind of do whatever with that third and final pick. Because then we're good at tight end. This is the nice thing when you kind of hit the sweet spot with the onesies, like Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, perfectly cromulent quarterback pairing. George Kittle, Hunter Henry, perfectly cromulent 2 tight end pairing. We still had, 5 wide receivers through 106 picks and then grabbed 2 more, Leggett, Pearsall. I think it's probably 1 running back, 1 wide receiver to land this, but enough flexibility that if we, particularly love something, like say the Dawson Knox thing, I think we could still do Dawson Knox as a third tight end here, get 1 stack in there and just knowing the expectation of that last round wide receiver, maybe not that much different than going with a third tight end that does give us some stacking upside. Stepfather, 6 TDs in 14 games for Hunter Henry in the worst low-scoring situation ever. He's such a smash. Yeah, I do like that we get a unique variable, a new variable with a potential big quarterback upgrade. And as much as, the Patriots attempted to address their wide receiver room, adding Baker and Polk is certainly something. It's not out of the question that, Hunter Henry is still what? Number 2? It is a truly ambiguous kind of target pecking order. But at least we know Hunter Henry is going to be on the field. Hunter Henry is the exact kind of pick that I have no problem with. I probably will not often find myself clicking him at ADP, but I will be very excited to get him at a discount. How many Jalen Tolbert teams you drafting this year? Yeah, last year we famously had a rule where I said I would only have one share of Jalen Tolbert. And I stuck to it. I'm trying to think, would I take any Jalen Tolbert this year? I think there are worlds where I'd take Jalen Tolbert. I have Dak Prescott. I need an 18th round flyer. Sure. I'll set the over-under at 1.5. Place your bets. Pete, over or under in Best Ball Mania, 1.5 Jalen Tolberts. Place your bets. All right, I am going to just go ahead and get my mega San Francisco stack in here. We're going to go ahead and tack on Eli Mitchell. Eli Mitchell was a guy that I talked about in the Fallers video, as I wanted to see him fall a little bit before I started taking him. And now he falls out of drafts. I took him with an 18th round pick the other day, take him at 17-10 here. I think this pick is probably Dawson Knox. By rank, I do have the leg up ranks in here. Dawson Knox, one of the better picks. If there was an obvious, because even my guy DeMarcus Robinson is gone, right? And I don't know why I said my guy. That just rolled off my tongue in a way I just immediately wanted to take back. Not my guy DeMarcus Robinson is not here. He's already gone. Yeah, to me, this seems clearly like we said we had kind of a luxury pick. Don't necessarily need 3 tight ends in this build. There's no other running back or wide receivers that I have to have here. So let's go ahead and break it in favor of a stack. Collect your prizes if you predicted me selecting Dawson Knox on this team. The ultimate port in a Josh Allen storm. All right, looks like we got some unders, over. Under, smashing the under. Did a milestone chat go through? Here. Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I miss these chats. Thank you for reminding me. What if solo quarterback Taysom Hill is what you need? What if? I think Underdog should do a promotion. They probably shouldn't, but it would be funny if Underdog did a promotion where it's if you win best. How about this? Now I need another over-under from you guys. Sorry, I'm workshopping this in my head as I think it through. How many Taysom Hill solo QB teams do you think there would be in Best Ball Mania 5 if Underdog came out with the promotion? If you win Best Ball Mania 5 with a solo Taysom Hill quarterback team, we will double your first place prize. So instead of winning 1.5 million, you win 3 million, but it's only if you win and only if you win with a Taysom Hill solo QB. How many Taysom solo QB teams do you think? I would have to make a new video. Is week 17 all that matters, parentheses, Taysom Hill new expected value calculation? That would honestly be a fascinating social experiment. How many people could we have chasing a 2x first place prize? Yes, Hoosiers. Thank you for your super chat here. I missed Star Kindlers. Zeke not following this room was perhaps the most surprising moment of 2024 so far. Zeke, man, he's going to get clicked. He is going to get clicked. Not necessarily by me, but by someone. Willis would draft 5 solo teams on his own. Would super suck if multiple people tried it in the same draft. Luckily, only one person can attempt it. We haven't gotten to the point where Underdog is releasing multiple copies of players. Maybe this is what they do. They create the contest that is just called the solo Taysom QB contest. We'll have to workshop that name. And there's like 10 copies. No, there's 12 copies. There's 12 copies of Taysom Hill at quarterback. So every drafter can theoretically have the Taysom Hill solo QB team if they want it. That's what it is. There's 12 copies. So Taysom Hill would never go in anything other than the 18th round. But if you wanted to be eligible for the $3 million Taysom Hill top prize, you would have to still grab him as your solo quarterback with the last pick. I don't know if I like this idea. I think I went down a very dark, hypothetical rabbit hole with this ideation. So thank you, Hoosiers, for that. Thank you. We're going to have Shawn Siegele joining us here in a couple of minutes for the Best Ball Banana Stand, but I am going to recap this team. My, what is this, 18th, 19th Best Ball Mania team? Today is 5/13. This is Best Ball Breakfast. This is a 2-6-7-3 build around Buffalo, LAC, and San Francisco. Let's see what we got here. Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford at quarterback. 6 running backs, Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Brooks, Brian Robinson Jr., Zach Charbonnet, Bucky Irving, and Eli Mitchell. Wide receivers, Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Jordan Addison, Mike Williams, Xavier Legette, and Ricky Pearsall. Tight ends, George Kittle, Hunter Henry, and Dawson Knox. So we have a classic Rams double stack, Stafford, Puka, Kupp. We have a mega 49er stack without Brock Purdy. So we have Eli Mitchell at running back, George Kittle at tight end, and then Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver. I like that. We have a couple New England guys here, Hunter Henry and Ramondre Stevenson. We have a couple Carolina Panthers in Jonathan Brooks and Xavier Legette. I like this. I like this squad. I think in a perfect world, you have, maybe one other Bills guy there. Like, I would have loved to have had Ray Davis on this team. But Ray Davis was gone by the time I even picked Bucky Irving. So I just don't know how I'm ever getting to Ray Davis there. But something like Josh Allen and Ray Davis would have been a nice little pairing there. All right. It is now time for our transition here to the Best Ball Banana Stand. I'm going to bring Shawn Siegele up here in 1 sec. When we return, it's the Best Ball Banana Stand. All right, we got Shawn Siegele here with us today. As always, for the Best Ball Banana Stand, I'm Pete Overzet, and we are going to draft a Best Ball Mania 5 team. We are going to battle the live stream viewers, whoever ends up getting in this draft with us, and try to build the highest upside possible team to help us take down that $1.5 million prize. Shawn, always look forward to these drafts. How are you doing?
Good. As I was kind of thinking back on it through the week last week, I don't know if it'll turn out to be the best, obviously, but I do think that the team that we drafted last week certainly was one of the most fun teams that we've drafted. And you just mentioned upside. I just keep going back to how fast our team was last week. And that's a fun way to draft it.
It sure is. It very much is. I think we were drafting a team on Ship Chasing the other night, and I was like, guys, we don't have a single running back here who runs a 40 under 4.5. Can we change this at some point? So yeah, drafting for speed is a very fun way to draft.
So we'll see if we can beat the Dolphins, beat the Chiefs at their own game again. Pete, some of the players that we went after are already generating some pretty serious buzz. The price is rising quickly.
I know. I was mentioning that, before, like last week we took, Jayden Daniels. He's jumped now almost a round and a half. I think he's approaching 2 rounds since the contest opened. There are some of these guys, Ben Sinnott, who we've, struggled to get. He's rocketing up draft boards, a lot of these rookies. So yeah, we're going to have the schedule coming out later this week, which will be a fun element to be able to talk through on our drafts. But it does feel like that window of broken ADPs, truly broken ADPs is close to evaporating.
Yeah, there are still a lot of things that I think current ADP allows you to do structurally. And I think the rookie running backs are going to get more expensive. The ones who don't have as clear a path, I think people are going to see the contingent upside better as we get closer. But it's also one of the risks, right? One thing that you have to deal with now that you won't later, beyond just these last drafts where you don't know the schedule, is that you're probably going to have more teams with more holes. And that does cause you some problems, not against your league mates necessarily, but against the contest as a whole. But Pete, the other thing that you just mentioned is this is kind of the last time that we can really freewheel it and just do whatever we want without having to worry about trying to complete some of those game stacks. And I think we should go as wild as we can.
I know it's like what would be an analogy? Like the way, people talk about like childlike wonder, seeing the world through the child's eyes. In a week, we are going to be these grizzled adults who have seen the schedule, who know the things we have to do to vault these teams to the top of the playoff pods. But for right now, we can just draft the best players, the fastest players, the most exciting players. And we don't have a reason that we need to make different decisions because of the way this contest is structured. And that's a beautiful thing.
It really is. We, what do we have here? Oh, the 12. So even a little bit more pressure this week there's not really a round 1 value at pick 12, is there?
Yeah, it's a tricky spot. And I will also say, I recognize almost every single name in this draft, Shawn. So this has all the makings of a wide receiver avalanche, a tough draft room, but I'm sure we are up for the challenge. As Shawn said, we drew the 112 here and off to the races in this Best Ball Mania 5 draft. Have you been getting any Best Ball Mania drafts in on your own, or are you still in kind of full dynasty mode right now?
I've done a few, and those have been fun. Just like I mentioned last week, I've been on the clock. Pat and I have been on the clock together, just, with all the different co-managers, basically every minute of the last week. And this is sort of we're going to have great dynasty content throughout the season, but this is maybe one of the last big weeks where my brain is still locked full in on dynasty. We're going to have some specific coupon codes for listeners just of this stream in the future. But Pete, as I mentioned, that RV Radio 2024 gets you 10% off our 1-year subscription if you want that dynasty content. And dynasty is something we've done pretty well. So I'm excited about what we're doing currently. And I'm excited to see who we take with these 2 picks. As we said, if you want to go wild and crazy, there should be some names.
Yes. So Garrett Wilson does go. We would have both been interested in him, looking. I need to get your ranks updated in here. I'll make sure that gets there. But by ADP, Gibbs, Marvin Harrison, anything else jump out to you?
I think we could take those guys. I'm not going to be able to get Marvin Harrison almost ever. And so you're stuck here at the 12th spot and you want to do something a little bit abnormal or just different than the normal path. I think this is a way to go with it. I think that his ADP makes very little sense. And yet, when you have the 12th spot there and you don't have another clear guy you have to have. The other thing I was going to float is maybe taking Nico Collins, around to get an interesting build there. I think that he is undervalued. I think Chris Olave is undervalued. We're probably going to have a number of other drafts where we can select those guys.
Yeah, like a couple things there that I think are interesting to unpack. First of all, the one thing I always think about of the unique builds is how it can be a little tougher to pull off this year because we still have, in the grand scheme of the overall sample size of drafts, the ADP is still solidifying, and there's scenarios where all of a sudden we get bearish news on Tank Dell. He's not going to come back as expected. All of a sudden, Nico Collins is now going at the 1-2 turn as is, and we didn't actually gain anything from that. But I do think it speaks to how this tier of wide receivers specifically is just so ambiguous after Garrett Wilson. And almost any way you order it, I think people can make strong cases. And I've used the example of like, if Marvin Harrison was going at pick 24 and Chris Olave was going at pick 13, the discourse would just be flipped. It'd be like, hey, Chris Olave is a little overvalued here. And everyone would be like, but Marvin Harrison at the 2-3 turn, that seems nice. So it's like, they have to get ordered somehow. And then to your point, do you take a stand on that overvalued guy? Or do you say, I do want a little bit of Marvin Harrison, and to do so, I am going to just have to fall in line with the market?
And, I've made the point that I think you do want to make sure that as you draft this season, that you get rankings value in addition to hopefully generating as much ADP value as you can. At the same time, if Chris Olave were going at the 1-2 turn, you would just take him there in a decent number of drafts to make sure you had that. Because he's someone, especially coming out of the NFL draft, where, if he led the NFL in target market share, then I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. And we've seen what he can do in terms of weighted targets per route. He's a guy where if they get just competent QB play, and certainly their QBs have gone through some stretches where they played all right, then, it could be off to the races for him, where he's a mid first round pick next year. Now that's a lot on a guy that we didn't select, but Marvin Harrison too. It's a situation where I think there are some things about his profile that are probably a little bit overvalued, and having him ahead of guys like London and Ayuk and Collins, those names to me doesn't quite make sense. And if you told me at the same time that he was going to have that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson type of rookie year, and that he and Trey McBride were going to light the world on fire together, this Arizona Cardinals team took a big jump. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on, because one of the things I think is probably giving people extra confidence in Marvin Harrison is this idea of a pro-ready game, where we do still sometimes see incredible wide receivers take a long time. We always go back to the Amon-Ra St. Brown example, who's now one of the best receivers in the league. He couldn't get on the field until like week 12 or 13. Obviously, very different draft capital than Marvin Harrison, but it seems like people are saying this is the kind of guy that isn't going to need to get ramped up. There aren't going to be growing pains. He is so good and already so polished that he will step on the field and immediately be one of the best players.
And in this particular situation, I think if you have a vertical threat who manages the route elements of it and also has that size speed element, you have both things there. One of the, elements that's been reported with Xavier Legette in the last week is just that, the coaches are telling him he's got to work on his route running. And everybody's like, well, why did you take that guy where you took him? Right. It's like, he does have some upside, but he also wasn't good in college for a long time. And, now you used a first round pick on someone who's old, who you're arguing is developmental. We don't have that same issue with Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, we don't. Jewish McCaffrey referencing the Kyren Williams fall in here. One of the furthest I've seen him fall to pick 30. We are now on the clock. I do have Sean's ranks uploaded in here. Sean, looks like Etienne, Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, Trey McBride would kind of be the considerations. Do you have a double tap you like here?
Well, I think in this type of a room to go ahead and get both Flowers and Higgins probably makes the most sense. But if you wanted Dell instead, I would be very excited about that too.
Let's do Flowers and Higgins. I do agree that as much as we like some of the other picks, ETN, an exciting play, but we could get very behind at wide receiver if we're not careful. So getting the 3 here, I think now opens us up for even more flexibility at the 5-6 turn, where there generally is, options at almost every position, I think. So I kind of like the flexibility this gives us.
It does. And, in that range, you're not losing a ton of ADP value either to go ahead and grab those guys. And so I have them ranked in the middle of the 3rd round. I think they both could rise. When you think about the situation with Michael Pittman, it's not that he's not a great player, and if the passing game works, that he won't get volume. But if you look at him, you look at DK Metcalf, certainly you look at Cooper Kupp, you look at DJ Moore. Stephon Diggs, I think you could easily draft in the middle of the 2nd round. But at the same time, if he underperformed where he's going there, I also don't think that would be a surprise. Flowers and Higgins, maybe they have some of the similar elements, but I just feel like we're waiting for that year where Joe Burrow and these guys come out of the chute fast and completely and totally blow up. You and I, the team that we did get to the semis there was the Higgins team. It was based on his whirling, reaching, highlight reel, touchdown. And we finally got to see some of the things that he did, back in the day. I mean, he went through this almost full year stretch where he scored at the same level as Ja'Marr Chase and had, arguably better peripherals. Now, I don't think that we're going to get that again. I mean, Ja'Marr Chase is better. T. Higgins, the huge drop problems last year, I don't think those are going to completely go away. And yet, if he stays healthy, Joe Burrow stays healthy, he's right back to being a round 2 pick next year.
And it is interesting, right? Because last year we had these 3, I was going to say second fiddles, but I should say second bananas on this show in Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, and T. Higgins. And they were all going at the back of the second round. Maybe sometimes they would slip into the early third if you weren't in an avalanche room. And there was a lot of discussion about that. I think casual players will often reject this notion. Well, how can you take the second best player on his own team in the second round? We now have seen a correction of sorts. Jalen Waddle is still kind of regularly going in the second. Devontae Smith has fallen a good 6 to 7 picks from his ADP last year to kind of, late third. And then T. Higgins has slid the most. And it is funny to unpack what has changed for those guys going into this year. And I wonder, is there so much of the lingering T. Higgins wants an extension, could get traded, all of this uncertainty? Because I'm trying to understand, why is the situation not different for Jalen Waddle this year, slightly more different for Devontae, and then very much different for T. Higgins relative to their market prices?
Well, the one that really doesn't make sense is Devontae Smith, who outplayed A.J. Brown over, the last third, the last half of last season, and is a star in his own right. If you have concerns about that offense, which I think that you should, it's A.J. Brown's ADP that doesn't make sense. And yet at the same time, for the same reasons that we took Marvin Harrison, obviously drafters are trying to figure out what type of star type player you can take in that last third of round 1. So again, there's a counter argument to that. The big gap between T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle probably doesn't make sense, because the Dolphins now actually have added a few additional pieces who could siphon some volume. I'm excited about a couple of those guys, not really excited about Odell Beckham. Whereas Higgins, they also draft an interesting third player, but very similar in that they don't stay healthy and they drop a lot of passes. Higgins was an extreme example of that last year, but if you had a guy who's going to go out there and score 15 touchdowns this year, there are a handful of names you might mention, but Higgins is certainly one of them. And you put him in this group where Harrison, if you're going to draft him at the 1-2 turn, you want to put him in that group too, and we could have a lot of touchdowns on this team.
For sure. Some interesting things going on in this room. JGFC double tapped elite quarterback in the 3rd and 4th round, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. We see Alex Keaton go double elite tight end with Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid. We are about to pick at the 5-6 turn our squad here through 4 rounds, the Jahmyr Gibbs, Marvin Harrison start. And then we, of course, went with Zay Flowers and T. Higgins in rounds 3 and 4. And we will take a look here in 1 second to see what we are looking at for these picks. Looking at ADP, you see James Cook, Joe Mixon, Anthony Richardson, Marquise Brown, Kenneth Walker. And then looking at Sean's ranks, we have Cook, Walker, Aaron Jones, George Kittle, JSN. Addison goes. What do you think the play is here?
I do think we should get Kittle and give ourselves at least one of the elite tight ends. Beyond that, and we could go back to the running backs, because all 3 of those names there are interesting. We could try and find a better ADP pick at wide receiver. Obviously, Rice is falling through the floor at this point. Marquise Brown, I think, is vaguely interesting there. And we could get caught at wide receiver, but I think there are some receivers in that kind of 12 through 14 range that are interesting. I actually like the guys at the very end better than last year as well. So I don't think it's as much of a force of the receiver as it might have been in a loaded room last year.
Yeah, let's take James Cook here. Falls 9 picks past ADP. Don't normally get him in the 6th round. And I agree. I think it's funny because there was some conversation earlier I think it was during the big board about how there's this line of Christian Watson where he's just kind of in this floating amorphous ADP blob, and how he was kind of the Rashad Bateman of last year, and that this was the last guy a part of a clear tier or whatever before it fell off. I have not felt that yet in this year's draft. I do think Christian Watson's a weird ADP enigma kind of on his own island, but there are lots of players after that that I think are more attractive right now than the picks who were going after that at wide receiver last year. So I don't know if the landscapes are the same, and it has made me more willing to grab a running back, grab a tight end, grab an elite quarterback, knowing that I do like some of those picks there. One ranking I wanted to ask you about, although maybe I will wait right now, but what are your thoughts on James Cook here? You, and I don't think Pat either in his ranks really pushed him down a ton after the Ray Davis draft pick. How are you thinking about him both at cost and just kind of his prospects in a vacuum?
I think that you have to play him as the electric piece and the established piece of an offense that is going to score a lot of points and is going to be more running back heavy than it has been in the past. Now, one of the tricky parts about Ray Davis is you bring in a guy who, could be a high value touch type of player. And so that part worries you, I think, because with Cook, you certainly need to get some of those touches to make that ADP work out at all, to get the value there. It's very possible that Kenneth Walker will end up being just a much, much better pick. And so I have those guys fairly close together. And yet Davis, although there are lots of great things about his profile, he actually had really strong college seasons for 3 different teams, but the individual characteristics and individual traits don't pop to the extent where you're saying he could really push aside someone who has the playmaking ability of a James Cook. So I've been a little bit lower on him than some of the other guys when looking at how the dynasty rookie drafts are going off. And you can get a little bit, again, of insight that washes back to the other format when you see how people are drafting there. I think that Davis is probably just like the tiniest bit overvalued, making me comfortable with James Cook where we have him.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought it was one of those interesting dynamics where some of the early ranking sets are kind of determining who slides or not. Like, various, sites had, AD Mitchell way buried in their rankings after the draft. So drafters who are using rankings are letting those guys pass more reliably, moving the ADP down. James Cook's ADP didn't get changed a ton, like in your ranks, in Pat's ranks. He kind of held strong to his big board ADP. And so he hasn't been as much of a faller, which I think is up for debate. But I like that we were able to get him here at pick 61. And now we were about to pick at the 7-8 turn. It's so funny because I was going to ask you about Aaron Jones earlier, and I was like, I won't say anything until he's off the board. He falls all the way to pick 83. Crutches does take him here. What do you want to do? We got the Christian Watson. We got your guy, Brock Bowers. We could stack up T. Higgins. What do you think the play is here?
Well, let's take Burrow to start.
Okay. Yeah, he falls a full round past ADP here at 85. That seems to make a ton of sense. What do you like with this next pick?
For me, it's probably going back to Bowers. I know he's probably going to fall another round, but he's not going to get back to us. And having those guys together, I think really opens up the rest of the things that we want to do. And at the next turn, I think there are just going to be so many options. I have a lot of guys ranked as sort of fun targets in that range.
Yeah, so we do go Joe Burrow to stack up with Higgins. We grab Brock Bowers at pick 85. Yeah, I think in some drafts you would maybe see him fall to 108. He's definitely not falling to 108 in this draft. So we lock him up. And then the big question people are going to have is like, okay, you had a lot of flexibility with that 3 wide receivers through 4 rounds. Now you've gone 4 straight non-wide receiver picks in a presumable, wide receiver avalanche room. Are you going to be able to recover? Which I feel like, Shawn, was a question we were asking ourselves constantly last year as well.
It was, but especially at this point, I'll just say there are a lot of names I'm irrationally high on, or a lot of names that I don't really fit the market on. And so this is the time to play it. And again, especially this week where we don't necessarily have to force specific things in order to get the build right. well, there we see Jayden Daniels go. And so especially if you're not going to need to draft a Senate in this draft, then taking that second elite tight end, I really like. Bowers is one of the guys where I do think after people have seen him play, he's going to go much earlier. The Ferguson ADP, I guess I don't get, simply because the talent doesn't separate. And so that role has been so valuable. Does that hold up over guys like a David Njoku, for example? But, getting a player who has that role and getting that tight end, I do think is something that all drafters want to be aware of. The only thing last week that became a little bit of an issue for us was that second tight end. And I mentioned how it was one of my favorite drafts that we've done. I think it's one of the highest upside drafts that we've done. Certainly having the two tight ends here, I think fixes the one minor weakness that team had.
Yeah. And, we are seeing, in this draft, people talking about, you mentioned Jayden Daniels going. We're seeing a lot of the, most sexy guys, the most desirable picks going ahead of ADP as guys go and get their guys. There was John Boy Beats, who does some great kind of ADP data analysis, had a tweet the other day where he was showing kind of how there is an inflection point for rookie ADPs around this point, which makes sense because it's only the sickos drafting, the people who are super excited post NFL draft, and that you'll often see these prices then come down a little bit as the summer progresses. And so that's always kind of an element in the back of my head too, of like, you don't want to get shut out. You want to get the profiles and the guys you want, but you also want to be conscious that everyone is at a fever pitch right now for wanting to get these guys on their team.
And the names that seem like really aggressively valued to me are going to be those surprise picks into fantastic spots. So guys like Ladd McConkey and Keon Coleman, I would expect them to fall again. I would expect Mitchell to fall. But I think there are some other players where, because the spotlight isn't on them in the same way, or the draft didn't move them as much, that we'll see them kind of gradually shift into the right spot, or at least a different spot as the drafts go along, as opposed to these huge changes that we see right now as we're trying to figure out, how much did the draft help or completely damage an individual guy?
Yep. And we are about to pick at the 9-10 turn. We are seeing, some of these wide receivers pushed up a little bit relative to ADP. We have a string here, Cortland Sutton, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, AD Mitchell, who we talked about was kind of a polarizing ADP, but Alex Keaton going and grabbing him. We are about to pick at this turn, which again, picking at the turn can be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes if you are behind at a position, it does force you to reach because you just don't know what kind of runs are going to happen, what player targets would potentially make it back. So we will see what we're going to do here at the 9-10 turn. By ADP, we got a few quarterbacks at the top: Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy. By your ranks, we could get Chase Brown, which I think does make a ton of sense with this Cincinnati build and not even that far ahead of ADP. What else do you see here?
Yeah, Javonte Williams, interesting and obviously controversial because they added a number of backs there, but also the running back who ends up as the guy. So let's go with Brown, as you mentioned. I think that's the good one to start with. The next one is a matter of, what's the most fun play between, Williams, Lloyd, and Spears, probably. But the other thing we could do is just make sure we get Jerry Jeudy. He's one of the guys where I think he's probably pretty significantly undervalued, and that's maybe our position of need.
Yeah, because your rank puts him up here, his ADP is in this same range. I think we have seen some of these running backs dropping a little bit in this room. Let's go ahead and lock up Jeudy. It is, of course, ahead of ADP, but also I think won't put us quite in a straitjacket that we might feel at wide receiver, where it's like, I want to make sure we have some chances to continue to scoop running back value with some of these picks. And I know sometimes it's like, man, if we take another running back here, it's like we might have to go 4 straight wide receiver picks.
Yeah. And so Jeudy is someone that I have a pretty decent amount of exposure to. I think that there's plenty of risk that what we've seen from him is all that we're going to get. He was hurt by the quarterback play last year pretty badly. At the same time, you look at some of those games down the stretch, and even when the ball did get to him, he dropped some plays that would have been just very straightforward plays where if you're Jerry Jeudy and you're going to be an above average NFL starter, you've got to make that play. I think going to this Cleveland Browns team where you have excellent coaching, you have a weird quarterback dynamic, but you also don't have stars. And people are going to disagree with me on Amari Cooper, but you're looking at that spot where he could kind of go away again, as he has done throughout the course of his career. Jeudy is a player where if everything comes together with him, you look at some of the peripherals through his professional career, you go back even and look at how he compared to these guys who are going in rounds 2 and 3, when he was in college. I think that this is kind of a last gasp, but at the same time, when the Browns acquired him, they also paid him, right? So they think that he can work. And this is an organization where if the Browns are saying that they like this as an upside type of play, you compare that to Shaheed, who goes right ahead. There's probably an ability to draw targets element for these guys who went in the round ahead of him that doesn't match what he can do. Now, Cortland Sutton probably stands out as being, a very good value in that round. But the other guys, can they draw targets better than Jerry Jeudy? Can the guys who went later in this round? I guess I would question that. But again, I'm a Jerry Jeudy true believer at this point, I guess.
Yeah, no, yeah, you've been high on Jerry Jeudy for a while. I don't think his public sentiment ever recovered from when Steve Smith said no one wanted him and he wasn't good on national TV. That was tough for Jerry to come back from. But I think a change of scenery, undeniably, is good news for him. Although, Shawn, my guess is you would have gotten pretty excited about Jerry Jeudy with Bo Nix as well. So maybe the change of scenery isn't impacting your feelings.
It's interesting because different news media cover their teams differently, but it's funny to hear the stuff coming out of Denver where they love what Bo Nix is doing. The stuff coming out of Patriots camp are like, Drake May's got to improve at everything. It's like the Xavier Legette question again. It's like you had some huge offers to move down in the draft and take somebody else.
I know. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. I will admit I have it's weird. It's both like a moral objection, but whatever, we're drafting fantasy football teams and still just not being convinced that Deshaun Watson is good from what we've seen post Houston. And so that has kind of had a trickle down effect into making these other Cleveland pieces not as enticing for me. And it also kind of lines up in a weird way where like Amari's in a weird ADP tier. David Njoku is right after that elite tight end tier. And you could argue he's overpriced. What's the Jerry Jeudy addition going to mean for this offense? So it's like, it's just a lane I haven't found myself in a lot of my early drafts, but I do see the prices on some of these Deshaun Watson double stacks, and they're very palatable, relative to the upside. So I get it. All right, we're about to pick at the 11-12 turn. Looking at ADP, this is one of those spots. Like Shawn, I was in the same spot in my previous draft where I had Ayuk and Kittle. And then Brock Purdy's falling and falling. I had already taken an elite quarterback, and I'm still thinking about my 2v2s. And I'm like, I pushed Brock again because I thought my team had other needs. Where do you think we're at on this team relative to wanting to be done at quarterback or grab another position?
Yeah, I think if you like Purdy, this is a good place to. You have that massive upside with Kittle. For me, it's then you either take that wide receiver that we've been criticizing, or we go to a running back.
I think I want a wide receiver with one of these picks. So I went and grabbed Legette for us. And now let's decide between a running back or Brock. I want you to decide the best way to go here. We got a 1-3-5-2.
Well, we've taken Jalen Wright. We've made the argument for him and that speed. I think that Charbonnet is pretty interesting as kind of the bounce back from last year. We haven't gotten Kendre yet. He is somebody who looks undervalued to me, and we've missed him a couple times. Any way that we want to go there is good. So we go with Charbonnet. He's probably the least fun of those three guys. And yet, I think the Seattle Seahawks offense is going to bounce back in a big way. And you're going to have some standalone value with him because it's going to be a committee, maybe even a more balanced committee, because that second year is where the second guy drafted can really push even without an injury. You have an injury, he's off to the races. I think he should be more expensive this year than last year because we saw just enough to validate the thesis that people had on him, which was an interesting one. It's one that works very well for fantasy football.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm kind of thinking through with the quarterback situation is like, what other viable stacks do we have? Deshaun Watson is available. Bryce Young, if we want to stack him up, is available. If we wanted to do something with the Las Vegas room, that's available. Even something with, I believe Goff's gone. Geno would be available if we wanted to build something out with Charbonnet. Basically saying, I just end up liking the 2v2s of the later quarterback there. And we also just had the single stack with George Kittle. Mine was a little different last show because it was the double stack, but I like continue to kind of compound our benefit or our lead, I should say, at running back here. And so we're now at a 1-4-5-2 build. Joe Burrow at quarterback, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet at running back, up to 5 wide receivers, 2 rookies, Marvin Harrison and Leggett, with Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, Jerry Jeudy in there. And then the double tight end, George Kittle, Brock Bowers. So we're still going to have to make up some ground at wide receiver. But one benefit I've noticed, Sean, sometimes in these rooms when you are in an avalanche is eventually the wide receiver heavy teams have to swing back and start drafting other positions. They have 6-7 wide receivers. They can't keep going there. So we might be able to get some of these wide receivers we like at the 13-14 turn.
Exactly. And there are some names I'm looking at very closely here that I hope do fall to us. The other thing with taking Leggett is that, as I've thought about this over the last week, I think that Bryce Young actually is more interesting than his ADP suggests. I pointed out that where people are drafting him in best ball suggests that he's probably overvalued in Dynasty. But I think that we have to take the insights from both groups of drafters and understand that it also works a little bit in the other direction, in that you have a lot of very sharp Dynasty drafters who are acquiring Young right now. And if that acquisition is going to work out, I mean, this will be the season that they do it. I think because the Panthers were at least moderately criticized on all of their acquisitions, those draft picks, as being, reaches, or maybe not the guys that, were the buzzy, cool players, that we can miss on how many people that they added and how they have redundancy there, even for one of the guys to miss. I mean, the Panthers actually go from being, a non-NFL type of team in terms of the skill positions to now having a lot of interesting pieces, even if the pieces have questions. If some of those guys do hit along with a Deontay Johnson, then suddenly you have, and you get the coaching staff change as well. Now you have a big shift in terms of what they could do. So when you're looking at Bryce Young as a pick in the last couple of rounds, that becomes a lot more palatable than, say, spending on Brock Purdy, as you mentioned earlier.
For sure. Before I forget, make sure if you guys are listening to the audio feed of this, you can check out the video streams on my YouTube channel, Peter Overzet. You can also get the audio versions on the Best Ball Banana Stand on the RotoViz podcast feed, as well as its new separate podcast feed. We are on the clock here, Sean. We got a couple names up here. Jermaine Burton, if we wanted the stack, some other wide receivers. What do you think is the play here?
I think we should go with Burton and Franklin.
Burton, and let me get Franklin in there. So we'll get a couple rookies here. And yeah, let's go ahead. We'll grab Franklin. Burton is the easy one as far as for this specific team with Joe Burrow. We're making a bet on him, this offense, in a big way. Talk through Troy Franklin. Obviously a guy who didn't get near the draft capital that everyone kind of expected. He was a very popular pick in the big board because of his exciting profile. Now falls in the draft. Does he deserve to be going alongside some of these guys who went in the 3rd round or in the 2nd round, like Jalen Polk, or is he a more fragile selection there because of that capital?
I don't think so, in part because for me, he was in that tier with Xavier Worthy and Rome Odunze pre-draft. And, partly if you're going to search for information on Franklin, you're going to find the pieces where people are saying, well, he was underdrafted. But you look across a wide variety of sources and everybody are saying, like, this is the best pick that was made in the reality draft. And I think it will be different if you had established receivers with the quarterback. But the fact of the matter is that, Courtland Sutton is unhappy. Troy Franklin is the guy who has the rapport with the person who's going to be pulling the trigger. And so, Marvin Mims, he could also break out. I think he would be fun to add as well if we end up feeling like we need another wide receiver to work in and give us that potential late round play. I mean, partly now, we can also take Bo Nix at the very end if we wanted to. I think that part could potentially be fun, in part because Nix has a 514 rushing season as a prospect, which, for fantasy specifically, if you get that manifesting at the professional level, then you have somebody who could win for you from the back, which is, what you want. If you're going to draft the late QBs, they do still need to have upside. But Franklin, a player who can do all kinds of things, and he's another one where I think the insight from Dynasty is interesting. I went into these rookie drafts thinking he was going to fall and he's going to be available to basically every team, and yet he was going in the same range as those names. I mean, he's more popular than Jalen Polk. And so again, people are saying, look, this guy is simply the better player and you need to treat it that way.
Yeah, that surprised me in one of my dynasty drafts. I was kind of like, I had an early third, and I had kind of like circled in Troy Franklin as a guy I'd like to get there. And he went mid-second. And then I took Polk because Polk was the one who fell. And I'm like, all right, fine. Like, okay, I didn't think this is how it was going to go. But the market certainly is preferring them in that order. Marvin Mims does go off the board. We are going to be picking here at the 15-16 turn 4 more picks for this team. Right now, we have a 1-4-7-2 build, good at tight end, have covered or made up some ground at wide receiver with the Leggett, Troy Franklin, Jermaine Burton picks. Definitely a young squad with all these rookies. And then a very solid running back room. Gibbs, James Cook, Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet. As you mentioned, we've built out some flexibility at quarterback. We have a decent amount of stacking options. I can think of 3 right now with Deshaun Watson, Bryce Young, and Bo Nix. That could work. So decent amount of flexibility, Sean, as we head into this 15-16 turn.
And what are you thinking with this current group in terms of how you want it to end up with these final 4 picks?
Yeah, I think obviously 1 quarterback for sure. I think this is a team where we're grabbing at least 1 more wide receiver and probably at least 1 more running back, and then maybe 1 kind of dealer's choice pick. When I look at your ranks, do you want to take the Watson value here paired with Jeudy as one of our quarterbacks?
Well, I just feel like it's very bad karma to click that particular button.
Me too.
So, obviously you don't have to take Shipley here, but he is the person that I have as the rankings play. He's an 18th round. Watson is...
Do you have another wide receiver then that we would want to take here, knowing we are going to get at least 1 more wide receiver?
Yeah, let's take Wan'Dale. He's the name that all of our correspondence falls under. When you go in and check out Malik Neighbors and the projections for him,
Sean to break by you, just to let people, the audio listeners know, Hoosiers wrote, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a Watson. And I think that got Sean. But sorry, what were you saying about Wan'Dale?
Well, it makes me happy that you're willing to take a running back that I can't get my co-managers to draft in like round 4 rookie drafts.
I will say, every time I click him, I'm like, with you, Sean, I'm like, not only are we taking this guy well ahead of his ADP, I'm not even sure where exactly he is on the depth chart, but in Sean I trust. Let's build up my Shipley exposure in these drafts. I will blindly follow you there.
So we'll see how that works out. But the Neighbors element, I think, is interesting because you did finally see Wan'Dale look like the guy that they thought they were drafting when they took him, in the same range as these trendy guys who are going this year, right? And so he played well down the stretch, and then you listen to the media covering the Giants, and they're saying, well, obviously Neighbors is probably going to lead the team in receiving, but the guy who is there to push him and could, make it a race is Wan'Dale Robinson. It's like, well, one of those guys is going, at the 2-3 turn, and the other one is going, round 16, round 17. So, I think it's going to be Neighbors, but if this offense functions, which I think they're set up to finally do this year, then Robinson is somebody who could absolutely smash that ADP.
Yeah. I like all those Giants. We see Jalen Hyatt come off the board. He's been a guy I've been clicking a good bit as well. Yeah, both interesting names. Like you said, if it could just be a rising tide lifts all boats situation, as opposed to the entire offense is built out of neighbors and everyone else isn't relevant. But man, you think of a guy, what that team struggled to do last year was just move the ball, be efficient, have red zone opportunities. If Neighbors is able to kind of drag them into the red zone way more than they did last year, that has to be a benefit for the rest of the offense.
Yeah. So, we've got now in the 17-18 turn should have the quarterbacks that we want.
Yeah, the room might just force us to select Deshaun Watson, though. Sean, it's like once you just basically, Sean, you said there will be like a hex placed on your house in all of the future generations if you select Deshaun Watson. Everyone's like, oh shit, okay, I probably shouldn't take him. That was just your way for us to get Deshaun Watson at 204 instead of 181, right?
Well, I get these trade offers in Superflex where people want to give me Deshaun Watson, and I really go out of my way because they already have him on their roster. So you don't want to be like, you're a bad person because you're already rostering Deshaun Watson. So I make all of these tortured explanations for why I don't want him at this great price. And and in the end, you just have to be like, I don't want Deshaun Watson.
I know. All right. We are going to pick here. We are going to have to ask this question here. We do also have, we have all of the other quarterbacks that we were interested in here that are stacked. So you have Watson with Jeudy. You have Daniel Jones with Wandell. You have Bo Nix with Franklin. You have Bryce Young with Leggett. You could also build out a secondary Carolina stack if you wanted to do Leggett and a third tight end with Jatavian Sanders. What do you think the way to go is here?
Yeah, so let's go with Bryce Young.
Yep.
And then I'm really torn. I want Daniel Jones for this team. I think he's got massive upside. I think Bo Nix, we'll get Bo Nix anytime we want.
True.
It's a question of then, we've got those two elite tight ends. We took Sanders last week. I made the pitch for this Carolina offense. And so it's very tempting, within the context of that, to go ahead and take Sanders. I do maybe think that Daniel Jones is the way to play it, but I'm very open either way.
Yeah, let's do it. I think it's funny too, because this was one of the questions. I think this is a good thing to kind of unpack because there's multiple elements here with the third quarterback selection, right? Where I think from how we allocated our draft capital, that you could justify, hey, we took Joe Burrow at 84. That's a premium pick still for a quarterback. And then Bryce Young, if we are anticipating a bounce back, we're already buying in on his top rookie wide receiver. You could stop at two quarterbacks here. But I think some of the benefits and how maybe Bryce Young is just thin enough that the third quarterback makes sense here from a positional standpoint, but also then dials us up those three individual stacks, which I was talking about at the beginning of being so potent when we're trying to have unique differentiators, unique pieces to progress us through these pods. Maybe 1 week it's the Giants, 1 week it's Carolina, 1 week it's Cincinnati. So those are kind of the things I'm tossing around in my head with 2 versus 3 quarterbacks. How good is that second and third quarterback? I assume with Bryce Young, maybe just fragile enough to like that third piece.
Yeah, and this would also fit with a couple of other things that we've talked about, which is one, I think that this week where we don't have the schedule, that 3 QBs is a little bit more palatable because we don't have to force those other pieces. And as opposed to getting game stacks, we have the 3 different stacks, as you mentioned. I do think that if you're talking in 17, 18, I like that for the QBs. And Daniel Jones gives you both that stack element with Robinson, but also a guy who, and I think this even goes back to, I could be remembering correctly, but Pat's team a couple of years ago, where you get the monster game that is really not related to the receivers. But when I'm taking an additional quarterback there, I want him to be able to score based on sort of his hybrid ability. We'll see if Daniel Jones brings that, but I think especially by midseason, and if we're taking him there, we're betting on some hybrid ability. And then the third thing is just that if we take those 2 tight ends early, then using that last pick for a third tight end instead of taking the third QB probably doesn't make sense, because when we go ahead and make that mild reach for Bowers and say that, I mean, he's the guy, we want the 2 tight ends, you probably need to take the benefit of that by sticking with the 2 tight ends.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Daniel Jones thing. One thing that's been, and I forget, apologies if we talked about this on a previous show, but I think this was initially Daniel Raz over at Legendary Upside with Pat had flagged an interesting note in Daniel Jones's contract that it's fairly analogous to the Russell Wilson situation last year with the injury clause, and that the Giants might be incentivized not to play Daniel Jones the whole year and risk that full contract getting guaranteed if he does get hurt. Basically introducing some risk into the Daniel Jones plays all 17 games thesis. Is that something on your radar, something you consider here? Or is it, hey, he's a third quarterback, we know he has the single game upside, and if we could get a couple spikes from him, we'll take that how we can get it?
Well, we haven't invested so heavily in the Giants passing offense that when we're making that last pick, we're saying, well, I mean, the story that we're telling is based on that stuff not happening anyway. But I do still think, at least to an extent, that is the case, right?
Yeah.
And if you're on Neighbors, I mean, we didn't pick Neighbors, but you like Neighbors there, like both Robinson and Hyatt. I mean, the team has to work. And so the Broncos obviously didn't either, but I think that this team is successful. I think that Daniel Jones is going to be the solution for them within the context of it's difficult to find solutions that are massive upgrades. And so from that perspective, yeah, I mean, those types of things are a mild risk, but I think this team is going to be playing him in the fantasy playoffs.
I like that. All right, let's and that really is, I think that's a good point about this, right? When we talk about some of these scenarios and where it was different, right? That the Broncos kind of fell apart. Sean Payton and Russell Wilson did not have anything close to a working relationship. If the Giants are good, which we want them to be for some of these selections, then Daniel Jones will be playing into the playoffs. If Daniel Jones is bad, it's probably very bad for Wan'Dale Robinson, and this team we probably, say goodbye to as is. Although, to your point, we didn't spend a ton of capital, so maybe this team could survive a Giants implosion. But in the scenarios where this team wins us $1.5 million, it's because Daniel Jones is playing really well. Let me recap this full team here because I know we've had a few side conversations before we finish this one out. It did finish as a 3-5-8-2 build. Joe Burrow, Bryce Young, and Daniel Jones. 5 running backs there: Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet, and Will Shipley. Got up to 8 wide receivers here: Marvin Harrison Jr., Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, Jerry Jeudy, Xavier Legette, Troy Franklin, Jermaine Burton, Wan'Dale Robinson. Tight ends: George Kittle, Brock Bowers. So we have those a mega stack on Cincinnati with Burrow, Brown, and T. We have, I guess not a mega stack. Oh yeah, Burton. Yeah, there was the 4th there. We have Bryce Young to Legette. We have Daniel Jones to Wan'Dale Robinson. And then we got those 2 hopeful elite tight ends in George Kittle and Brock Bowers. Sean definitely was kind of battling for wide receivers in this room. How do you feel like this one turned out?
I really like it because those are the receivers that I want if you get boxed out of the top guys. Now, Legette was more in a range where we made a pick in part to make a pick. So that might be the one where you look back and say, based on the 5th running back that we took there, maybe we, in retrospect, do want a running back in that spot instead of him. But otherwise, I think that those late receivers are fantastic. The question for me becomes, how did we play the running backs in terms of getting the 5th person? Now, I've moved Shipley down my rankings a little bit just to make him not pop out as being the top guy up there for so long, but he did still jump out. How are we looking in those rounds in terms of the decisions that we made when we took Franklin there, for example, to possibly open up the Knicks path as well, which we didn't end up needing. And in part, you've got to be aware that you're probably not going to need it because those QBs are going to be available late. What are you thinking about how we finished out the running backs that went from a strength at one point in the draft to where we moved away from it intentionally to maybe being not like a weakness, but certainly an area where if you had like one more name to get fired up about, you'd feel more comfortable?
Yeah. I guess I would say that I do like Bucky Irving. I'm looking at some of these picks. After we took Troy Franklin and Jermaine Burton, we were both in agreement. Burton made sense. The question would have been like looking at some of these 2v2s basically, right? Where if we took a running back at 156, say we take a Bucky Irving, a Tyrone Tracy, I believe 2 other guys you would be interested in there, and then grab the wide receiver at 180. What other wide receivers are we looking at? Maybe it's double tapping Giants with Jalen Hyatt. Maybe it's taking a guy like Javon Baker, but I don't see a huge opportunity cost in some of those 2v2s. There wasn't, a screaming wide receiver. We kind of were shrugging and taking both of these guys. So when I kind of think through it like that, I don't really mind it. Who would have been the running back selection for you had it not been Troy Franklin at 156?
Yeah, I think that both, as you mentioned, Irving and Tracy are the names that jump out there. And Irving, especially at that price, is a fantastic deal. I do think that he's got a great chance to, at the very least, he's going to have some standalone value in a committee. And if he's the starter in the last third of the season, I don't think that we would be surprised by that at all. You get that in round 14, and obviously you're off to the races. The other one, though, for me that is a little bit tricky and kind of goes back to this issue of, I think it was a really fun team that we drafted when you start with the 12th pick, because there are some problems. And there are problems like, if you really do want to hold to some semblance of ADP value, because one of the issues there is as you're building your running backs out, that group of guys kind of in the Kendre Miller range, you either have to take about a round early, maybe a round and a half early, or you're going to miss them. And then you're not going to feel very good about who you get instead. And so, we select Leggett and Charbonnet, and then the names that we really want, like those guys go in the interim. You get Jalen Wright at the end of 12. You get Miller early in 13. You get Kamani Vidal right ahead of our pick. If he had gotten one more spot, then I think it certainly would have been Burton and Vidal there. And so those are some of the things you have to deal with if you're trying to build out the running backs in this range, where I think like 8 to middle of 13 is loaded at running back, but you still have to pick them because you only get, one selection each round. And that means that if you miss some of these areas where they're really congested, then you're not going to end up with the guys. And so that's kind of, I think, the issue there in that 11-12 range versus the 13-14 range.
Yeah. And, one other thing too, I think I mentioned this on Ship Chasing the other day, but a thing I like to think through specifically with these early drafts is, how can we further supercharge our constructions? And I would already say when we're drafting Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, we are playing him as our anchor RB. He is our guy. But then from there, if we get James Cook at a value, and I like the phrase you've said recently, like a rankings value and an ADP value, where we could potentially be treating it as if we took him at the 3-4 turn instead. That's kind of how we're valuing him. If we had drafted, theoretically, 2 running backs in our first 3 picks, we would have probably played this as maybe a 4 running back team. Maybe you tack on a Will Shipley in the last round. So thinking of how you can use those ADP ranking values, how you can supercharge the structure by drafting like you're right and playing as if you're getting a windfall. I know for you, Chase Brown is a huge rankings value. So we are treating these guys, even though like how people, if someone spit this into a spreadsheet and said how you allocated your draft capital, it might say, oh, this is a little thin. But based on where you have them ranked, we have stacked up 3 really high quality running backs that allows us to be a little thinner late.
And having both the rankings value with Brown, the fit with Brown in terms of how he was going to build out our overall structure, but then the fit with Brown also as being part of what we did with the Bengals. If the other things that we're betting on with the Bengals come to fruition, it's really difficult for me to believe that Chase Brown doesn't score a lot of points.
Yep. Yeah. I think Chase Brown has already been one of my most drafted players in Best Ball Mania. I did a draft with, I had Michael Dubner on Best Ball After Dark on Saturday. We had a great conversation about some of the week 17 versus 16 dynamics. By the way, if you guys are YouTube members, you get access to all of those premium shows via the Best Ball Value Hounds tier. Did one with Ray G from Destination Devi on Friday, one with Michael Dubner on Sunday. But we also selected Chase Brown on that team. And I was looking at him being like, I keep clicking this guy in every draft. I think he's going to be a riser. Eventually, maybe I'll say goodbye to him as someone who rose up too much. And then like, he just kind of keeps chilling in this range. And he seems like one of the screaming targets in this early part of the drafts.
Well, one of the things that I was looking at with Brown versus Moss is, whether I needed to move them closer together and whether or not I needed to get more Moss to balance that out. And I think that I do need to make sure I get plenty of Moss because he's also someone who could be fantastic. But the thing I was looking at, I have them both above ADP. I guess I think the market has to be wrong on at least one, but I think it could be wrong on both of them. And so, I mean, you can go through stretches of the season in these best ball formats where each guy is scoring as an RB1 for you. They should be more expensive, I guess, is my main point there. You mentioned Michael Dubner. He and Blair have been working on this week 16, week 17, et cetera, for a piece that's going to come out on RotoViz. As you mentioned, Dubner is awesome. Obviously, Blair Andrews is awesome. I'm excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, no, I was working, Michael helps me out on a lot of the Deposit Kingdom videos, and we had worked together on the original week 17 is all that matters. We were in the lab all last week, and because I was working on the video and he was working on the article, and we're trying to wrap our head around the math of all of it and knowing if we should be prioritizing week 16 more this year than we did last year. And one thing is very definitive, even before you get into all of the microscopic, win rate stuff relative to EV, in that the flatter payouts make week 16 matter more this year than it did last year. And week 17 even matters more this year than it did last year. There's more money going to week 17 prizes in week 16 this year than last year because they eliminated the regular season prizes, which allowed for more playoff prizes, which is a fun thing. But then the real question is, do the flatter payouts make week 16 matter even more? Because as a thought experiment, and I said this in the video, if everyone got paid the EV of a finals ticket, which this year would be about $18,400, all 539 teams, week 16 would be all that mattered. You just try to get there, collect your 18.4K and go home. And so because they're flatter, it necessarily means week 16 is more important. The question is, how does that actually play out in practice? Should we still be game stacking and doing bringbacks for week 16? And that's kind of what I explore in that video, what I know Dubner is exploring in his article as well. So make sure you guys check out that video on the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel. Check out that forthcoming article on RotoViz. Super excited to kind of see how that plays out. And Shawn, I'm super excited for next week's. We will be dialing up some of these week 16, week 17 stacks.
That'll be so much fun. I mean, there's a lot to keep track of when we're chatting and trying to follow the board here, but to insert that element as well. And I'm excited to talk through some of those things with you. I think that this week 16 versus week 17 thing and how very, very minor the edges actually are with some things that you can do in week 16 to make a difference. And yet at the same time, I mean, week 16, you can get teams into, right? And so that's another reason, I think, to make sure you do some things there. And I think it also goes back, and we'll talk about this in more depth, but this element of getting rankings value and trying to build teams that have the right game stacks, but are just also supercharged with the types of players that you think could win for you in a vacuum. And so I'm looking forward to drafting these teams. They're going to be so much fun.
Yeah, and it's fun. This can happen with so many things when you think through kind of sample sizes and how you want to be careful kind of applying what happened last year to this year. Because if someone did just want to apply how week 16 went last year, they would say, hey, Pete, Amari Cooper and George Pickens and T. Higgins all went absolutely nuclear. And if you had one of those guys, you were probably going to advance. And if you had both of them, you were for sure advancing. And that's all you needed. Didn't need any correlation. Just take your 50 points from Amari Cooper and move on. And that does happen. Just drafting the best players, having the perfect play can be all it takes. It's just that stacking up these games, eliminating the number of things we have to get right, can be a way to kind of shortcut things for us. And then it just went on to be in week 17, we didn't have any of the 50-point scores, but we did have those game stacks hit, the Dallas-Detroit stack, of course, the Green Bay-Minnesota game with that winning Jordan Love to Jayden Reed stack. So it's not hard to envision how stacking this year, there could be a few shootout games in week 16, and it's having that game that gets you there, not that individual piece. And then it could flip. In week 17, you need the 50-point guy like it was Jamar Chase in BBM2 going for, an absolute explosion. So it's fun to think through the past slates because it helps kind of flesh out our imagination, how it could go, but also important not to just overfit it to exactly what has happened.
And one of the things that I sort of enjoy in terms of thinking through those elements, which I think that you just articulated perfectly, the roster construction explorers that Mike Beers built for us and that we've been using for a long time at RotoViz across also some different formats, just having that view of like the last 10 years of best ball and how every year is not the same, and being aware of how you might exploit things because people are chasing the previous year. I think that part is a lot of fun as well. And again, it's going to be so much fun going through those things with you as we get, into the summer.
Yeah. And it's a good point too. And one of the things when I was working on some strategy videos with Dubner, and one thing that, you guys at RotoViz have done well is layering in some of the historical data from the best ball 10s, which are not a perfect, 1-for-1 on the data we get in these tournaments, but can point us directionally in the right direction and just give us more of a sample size, because only having 3 slates from BBM 2, 3, and 4 isn't enough to draw stronger conclusions. And so when you look back and you're like, man, even in these smaller self-contained leagues, double elite tight end has been a dominant strategy. Like using that bigger resource and pool of data, I think has been really helpful in kind of understanding the bigger trends and not being as pulled by recency bias. And once again, the elite tight ends are such a great example of that. Like if you've gone through the data for 10 plus years of best ball, you're like, holy cow, elite tight ends are a dominant strategy. And yet because of what happened last year, it's not on the forefront of everyone's mind.
And I think it's crucial for me because I want to give the listeners and just myself, I like to play the contrarian plays, but I want them to be things that can work, that I know have worked in the past in these specific situations, and that they also tend to work big picture, right? And if there are ways that I can go against the current tide, but that I know historically have been dominant and give us some opportunities, those are some of the things that I want to point out, as opposed to we're going to throw some fun, hot takes in as well. But if you're being contrarian and are basically just wrong, that doesn't help anybody.
It sure doesn't. And excited to kind of have another puzzle piece to add into our drafts next week on the Best Ball Banana Stand. Like I said, thank you to all of our audio and video watchers / listeners. Love doing this collab with Shawn Siegele and the guys over at RotoViz. Make sure you guys are subscribed over there. But that is going to be it for us today. For Pete Overzet and Shawn Siegele, this has been the Best Ball Banana Stand. We'll see you guys next time. Nice talking to you as always, Shawn.
CB, it was awesome.
All right. Goodbye, Shawn. We are about to bring Pat Kerrane up with us here. Did just want to mention real quick, because this is a shift. There's a new deposit bonus on Underdog. For a while, it was the $100 deposit match. It's a new one. It is up to $250. It is a 50% deposit match. So if you are new to Underdog, you want to put in $500, you can get $250 in bonus cash. It's no longer capped at that 100. So theoretically, you put 500 in, you can have an account balance of 750 with Underdog topping that off for you if you guys are new to Underdog. But now I want to bring on the man of the hour, the man who writes about trees and guitar necks as it pertains to portfolio diversification, a recent father, the BBM 3 champ himself, Pat Kerrane. How are we doing? Oh, you're muted.
Feeling like a recent father. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, is it finally hitting? Starting to settle in?
Starting to settle in. We're so we have a little help at night, some nights, but not the weekend. So we did last night actually. So yeah, but essentially I feel like I just had like an insane weekend. Like I was out night after night, and now, but I did get sleep. But it's like one night of sleep making up for just like partying. But instead of partying, I'm just taking care of a baby all night.
It is one of the weird things too. Like when you have, your childcare during the week, and then you are on like essentially working full days on Saturday and Sunday, to where it's like it will eventually flip in your head where Monday will feel like your relaxed day. It's like,
that's already
finally.
flipped. I look forward to Mondays. Like Mondays are, it's not the Sunday scaries. It's the Friday. Like when it's Friday, I'm like, oh no, the weekend.
I know that's very true. Well, other than that, have you been getting in any drafts or no time for drafting with the dadding?
No, I have been doing some I've been doing some slows, and then I've been doing some Chihuahua puppy stuff just to like kind of experiment with things. I haven't done a ton of Best Ball Mania drafts. I think maybe I've done one since last week, maybe. So I'm really kind of dripping those in. I just at this point, I want that schedule, and I just have felt like the environment's not that different. I guess you can get some cheaper Rashad rice than before, but other than that, it's like the same prices ish, and we don't have the information. So I'm gonna wait a couple more days before firing there, I think.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I, early last week, I was still kind of like, I want to take advantage of a few of these prices. And then over the weekend, I had a couple cardio club drafts, and I was like, I'm just doing a puppy. Scratch the drafting itch, save the BBM bullets for post schedule. And it's still, like, don't get me wrong, it's an absolute blast to draft, but I don't feel like there's specific edges that I'm needing to push right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Pat, I did hop us in, and I do not think I've had an Influencer 101 yet for Best Ball Mania. Or maybe we did on our first draft. Did we draft CMC on our first one?
I'm not going to be the guy with the memory.
I do need to, that is true. I do need to upload our leg up ranks here. I just got a fresh batch from you guys this morning, and then we can get underway. Pat, let the people know if they do want to draft off of the ranks that they are seeing today, how they can get access to those.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. We've got best ball ranks for Underdog, for DraftKings, FFPC on the way. We've got Drico helping out there. He's been testing those. So we're going to be launching those pretty soon. But yeah, go to legendaryupside.com. You can sign up. It's only $10 a month right now, and $99 for the year. If you sign up for the yearly, you can get $50 in Underdog credit. You got to give me your username. There's a form right at the top of the page, or email me at legendaryupside@gmail.com.
CMC, or you got any other Galaxy Brain feelings for this morning?
No, let's take our 101. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the FFPC, because we were talking about the schedule stuff and how we have a Thursday and Friday night game. And I was explaining to the people in the chat who aren't aware of how some of those high stakes Friday, Saturday drafts work, where you have a draft already in the books. This year, if you're drafting Saturday, you're going to have both the Eagles-Packers game and the Chiefs-Ravens game behind us, which, I mean, you want to talk about 4 teams with a ton of high ADP implications. We could see some wild stuff in those opening drafts.
Yeah, no, I mean, the that's actually crazy for the high stakes stuff, that we're going to have 2 games to. I mean, you're going to see massive ADP shifts from those games. What do you think the move is? The move is probably to wait until both games, right?
Yeah,
if possible.
I think Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday. I mean, and we've usually
max amount of overreaction.
Yeah, we should probably like stay a little later and draft a team.
Well, or we, we'll obviously probably have our party on Friday. Maybe we just do more partying Friday, and then just hammer drafts all day Saturday, like nonstop. But yeah, you're right. It's hard, because we normally have been, us East Coasters, we fall back on Saturday.
Yeah, we fly back early morning Saturday the last couple of years, which has been pretty sweet. And then you get home. Last year I flew back to New York, and I got home in time that Brittany was like, "Let's go out." I was like, "All right."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going out this year, buddy.
No, I'm not.
Man. Let's see here. Do I recognize this is JGFC? Is this your 3rd straight draft with me tonight? I have been tipping you guys off in the Discord. I see Crutches got in here again. B Spurf, JGFC ripping some stream drafts today. If you guys are YouTube members, you sync your YouTube membership with your Discord account. That's the Deposit Kingdom Discord. I got links for all of that in the descriptions. It will unlock that channel. And then there's an alert where I will let you know when I'm hopping in these drafts. So if you want to come in battle, you can. Have definitely been in some wide receiver avalanche drafts, Pat. Like Sean and I had to take Jerry Jeudy at like pick 104 in our previous draft. So that's where we're at already.
Yeah. I mean, CMC putting you behind the 8 ball is something. One pick.
Yeah. One pick. And although one other commonality to my first 2 drafts this morning was Brock Purdy just falling like a rock. Sean and I took him at 130. I passed on him on a team where I had Josh Allen, still had Matthew Stafford in my back pocket for a Puka and Cooper Kupp. But he definitely is one of those guys. If you have a couple Niners and someone else doesn't want him, you can really push those guys.
It's strange because I've also seen him go early because it's like McCaffrey, Debo, and Ayuk are often on different teams. And so you're kind of like fighting for him. So it's interesting that he went that late. And we're looking maybe at like elite quarterbacks on the 4-5 turn, and then people just stopped needing him.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just been a theme. Sean and I took Burrow 20 picks past ADP with Higgins. Like these pocket passers will fall. Like it just lines up sometimes where the guy takes a Kyler, takes one of the other guys, and then they're like, yeah, I don't need them. And then no one else feels compelled to take them unstacked. We're about to pick at the 1-2 turn. We started, of course, with CMC, got our usual batch of wide receivers here. Although I will say Kerrane kicking around. He fell to the mid-3rd in my draft with Sean. We got Diggs, Neighbors, Waddle, Kerrane at the top of the ranks. What do you think?
I don't think we can afford the running back in this room.
I think you're right.
I would say Diggs, Neighbors, and Waddle, 2 of those.
Yeah. I feel like I don't take Diggs a lot on my own, so I will do that with you. And then Neighbors or Waddle, who do you think?
I love Neighbors. I mean, I like Waddle too, but Neighbors it's just easy to imagine how you're going to really, really want Neighbors at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And like back to the Kerrane thing of CMC, Kerrane, I do think in rooms specifically where it's avalanche, Pat, that's what he was speaking to, that we could get really shut out and behind at wide receiver, which I fully agree with. I also think too, like part of the benefit of Kerrane is you are playing like that scenario. Obviously, like you get what he did last year, but then you're able to have that as the anchor spot and really push your running back too late. Like that's kind of the benefit of getting that early anchor RB, where I would rather have Achane with CMC if I'm really trying to like twist the knife on a double running back start where I'm getting like 2 guys who could drop 30 in a week. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but it's just like Kerrane with CMC doesn't feel like the best pairing to me.
You have to just go. Your RB3 has to be like round 10 or later, especially in this room. Because I mean, there is something like Kyron's going to hold down a running back spot every single week if he hits, right?
Yeah.
Same with CMC. So you literally just have like the entire like running back is covered, like, truly covered. Week 16, week 17, you're just like Kerrane and CMC are gonna, Kyron's gonna score 25, CMC is gonna score 35. I'm good, and you just like, so that would be the advantage, and then you would just really, really push running back 3. Maybe like your running back 3 could be Chase Brown, and that's pretty sweet.
Yep.
But the problem is what happens in between those things, and in this room, I think we just were like, reaching. We're taking Curtis Samuel in the 7th round or something.
Yes. It's funny you mentioned that. And I was also listening to you and Eric. You guys had a show that dropped sometime over the weekend I was listening to and talking about a specific Bills hypothetical. And then I've like found myself in that spot a couple times where I took Josh Allen value. He was falling. I've grabbed him twice in the 4th round now. But I just never forced the stack because I'm just like, I don't like this price. Didn't work for me to get Keon Coleman. I'm like not taking Curtis Samuel over Mike Williams. Like there was just like some things I wasn't doing. And then it just ends up being, either Ray Davis or Dawson Knox are like the only guys I'm pairing because I just don't like the prices for those other stacking pieces.
Yeah, I when that happens to me, and I actually haven't gotten Allen in the fourth. That's awesome. I think the priority is Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir because the prices aren't that high on those guys, and I think that like the boost that you would be giving those guys with a stack is enough where they would like move up, probably around, right? So especially if you don't have a stack yet. That's how I've been playing. A lot more Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir than I would like because, Keon Coleman's getting expensive and the other guys are a running back and a tight end. So you can he's tough to stack because you can end up coming out of the first 5 rounds with a running back, a tight end, and a quarterback, and at most 2 receivers if you like prioritize stacking him with Cook and Kincaid.
Yeah, Andrew says, I think Kincaid's price is fair. I agree. The problem is if you get him as like a early 4th round value, you aren't going to get Kincaid coming back to like pick 58, 59, 60 most of the time. So you'd actually have to take them at the turn, which is interesting that I say that because this drafter right here out of the 12 hole gets Josh Allen at 36, slight ADP value, but then grabs Trey McBride as the reach. To me, I feel like if I was going to do the reach on tight end there, I would maybe just want to do Kincaid.
I don't even know if it's a maybe.
Yeah.
That's just a bad pick.
Yeah, if you are wanting to lock it up, I prefer McBride slightly to Kincaid in a vacuum, but when I have Allen, I much prefer Kincaid there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kincaid is a legit elite tight end. I mean, you're making a projection on like the talent for sure. He was an okay, not an amazing prospect, but and he was fine as a rookie. But he's sort of the Rachaad White of tight ends, where he got on the field and earned a lot of trust and showed the ability to earn opportunity in a big way as a rookie, which is meaningful. And then he enters year 2, and like the opportunity is massive. And I'm like, all right, cool. Let's see if it works. I mean, I don't think he needs to be elite. Most elite tight ends need to be truly elite, but he can be Evan Ingram on the Bills and smash, right? He can be David Njoku on the Bills and smash. Like that's fine. So the bar is just lower for the talent. And I think he's probably sufficient. So yeah, I would have taken him with Allen there. You're kind of making a bet on Kincaid when you take Allen.
So ETN was a big faller there, but he does go by rank. James Cook, we do have the tight ends, Andrews, Kincaid. The wide receiver would be Christian Kirk. How do you think we spend these 2 picks?
I think we got to get Kirk. And then I think we take Andrews or Kincaid.
Yep. You know what? I know you're very bullish on Andrews. I am too. I have a ton of Andrews and not much Kincaid right now. You down after all this Kincaid love to go Kincaid?
I've forced myself to take Kincaid over Andrews a few times.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's easy enough to see.
And I do think just anecdotally from my drafts, Andrews is the one, well, he has the later ADP, but he's also the one more likely to fall. I just don't see Kincaid fall past the mid-5th where like it was on my draft. I did with Dubner, Pat, on Saturday at Best Ball After Dark. We took Kelsey. We were at the back of the board. And then Andrews fell to us all the way at the 5-6 turn. And we're like, all right, we're going double elite with Kelsey and Andrews. So, wow. I mean, I just like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah. One thing that I try to think about with a guy like Andrews, right? Here's the setup with Andrews. I like him a lot, but he's also of the group, the guy who you can get the best prices on. And if I'm trying to prioritize him over Kincaid, at one point McBride, at maybe eventually Pitts, maybe Pitts flips him. Yeah. Then I'm going to end up with a ton of Andrews at the expense of all these other guys. And so then it becomes a question of, do I like the other guys? And I do. So now I'm like forcing myself to just take a little less Andrews, but when I do, I'm taking another one of the elite tight ends. So I'm just making sure I have exposure to the whole group because it's a good group. Like I heard you guys talking elite tight end as you were wrapping up with Shawn. I think elite tight end is one of the potential keys to the season. It's a sort of a volatile strategy where elite tight end is going to pay off if one of these guys has a massive run at the end of the season. And if they don't, you're probably going to wish you did something else. But, so it's volatile in that sense. But it's one of the kind of clearest ways I can see of really boosting our odds. Because if you have that guy, it's going to be, you could be looking at, like we saw when you and Eric made the final, finished top 10, that it was like all Andrews, and you guys not having Andrews was a huge edge.
Yep. Yeah. That Andrews like the regular season and early playoff advance hammer, and then just had a middling or below average week 17. I think the other way, when you talk about the volatility, I wrote about it in a Fantasy Life piece, and I said it's very similar to how you think about anchor running backs, right? Or your running backs with legendary upside, where it's like you're willing to take the cut, you're willing to take the bust rates, the injuries, the chaos, knowing that the rewards are outsized when you are right. And if you dial in the archetypes that you're making for those running back selections, when they do stay healthy and it comes together, you are correct at being able to identify that ceiling. You've made the point, we can do that with tight ends. We know which tight ends are capable for these elite ceilings. You have to be willing to, dare I say, crack a few eggs to make one of these omelets. But a couple of these guys are going to be league winners at these prices.
For sure. And yeah, potential week winners at the, in the fantasy playoffs. Yeah. League winners and week winners, it can be both. And that's what you're saying about the archetypes and us identifying the guys who have that potential is not hypothetical. I wrote about this last year. We're good at it. It's one of the few things in the market we're like really good at it. We pick the guys who, we can capture a bigger part of the spike week pie at tight end with our early picks than we do with the other positions. Right? We don't. Now, last year was a bit of an exception because it was an awesome rookie class. We had the Trey McBride breakout. It's possible we get something like that again, but this setup feels pretty different. I think it's a lot more likely that we're kind of back to the historical trend of us kind of predicting which guys are going to score a lot of points in the early rounds.
All right, so we are on the clock. All the fun picks came off. 3 straight rookies in a row. Burrow doesn't make sense for this team. Double tight end with Ingram, Aaron Jones, Godwin, Montgomery, Nuke, Rashi. What do you think? Tough spot here.
We got to go Godwin, right? We need the receiver, and then I'm probably going Ingram, and we're done at tight end, and we get the correlation with Kirk.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Otherwise, I'd be like, Ingram, should we prioritize something else? But being able to build out that potential stack, I think makes sense here with Kirk. And now we do have a decent amount of quarterback options late. I guess not a ton. I guess it's Lawrence and Baker so far, assuming we're not in on Daniel Jones.
Yeah, we're going to want Lawrence here. And the other move is to, we'll see if he comes back. But the other move is Daniels. You just grab Daniels. Yeah.
My favorite is when we get the guys who aren't regular commenters, but then they're in the draft and you start talking about their team and then they come out of the woodwork. We have the 12 hole here. Don't know how to pronounce your team. Yecoxer. I don't need to spend up for Kyler to benefit from Harrison McBride ping-ponging. I have a plan. I think saying McBride is just a bad pick is unfair this early. We definitely see your plan.
I didn't realize you had Harrison, so yeah, that's fine. That's fair. The Harrison part makes it a much better pick. I think Allen is probably what? He'll probably just skip Allen and build out it through Kyler. But we'll see. Let's see if he lands the plane. Because you're right. I mean, it could work out pretty well because he hasn't hit a lot of receivers. So maybe he's going to do Allen through the receivers, skip Kerrane, have the Cardinals unstacked without the quarterback, which is a move I like because you can cover Kerrane with Allen. So Kyron's score isn't really that. Or sorry, I keep saying Kerrane. Kyler's score is not that important because you're covering it with Allen. So, okay. All right. You're right. It was too soon. We'll see if you do it.
Although, like, I like doing the Allen covering, like, more with the other pocket passers, too. You know, like, I was doing it for covering, like, Stafford and Purdy in my first draft.
That's
morning,
easier.
Which I like way more.
It's a lot easier. Yeah. Kyler's score might be hard to cover if he's facilitating a double stack, but we'll see.
Yeah. I guess, like, to me, what this boils down to, and this actually came up with Shawn, too, of, like, I'm on board with the, like, let's go out and get some stacks and exposures to combos that we like, that we know you aren't funneled to typically by ADP. Like, I get that thesis in a big way. There's going to be holes in your portfolio where you're going to say, I have no, Kyler Murray double stacks. What I push back against is, do we need to be pushing those now, this early in draft season? Or is that something we look at halfway through Best Ball Mania, that we look at in August and then say, all right, ADP is settled. I now am going to move around the draft board, throw out some ADP at specific spots to get that combo. Whereas I would argue right now, the draft board can still get flipped up enough that what you're reaching for might just be able to be a chalk, easy stack at another point in the drafting season.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty bad right now to do that. Like, you're speculating in a way you just don't have to. Like, because, okay, it's not like, dude, there's no way that this guy's going to fall to the other side of the board. He's awesome. Like, yeah, he's awesome, but what if he pulls his hamstring, or he's going to miss the first 2 weeks of the season for like a small, low ankle sprain, or like, we know these guys can drop. It's like very, very possible. So the reach might not even have any value in terms of uniqueness. But I think the other thing is that we're getting an advantage by drafting now. And that advantage is, like, we don't know, like, how much the Bengals like Zach Moss or like Chase Brown, or like, we don't know, like, how the Cardinals running back situation is going to break. We don't know so much that there's actually probably major values in rounds 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that, like, you're like, oh my God, this is one of the teams where I got this dude in the 10th. You can't get him in the 10th anymore. He goes in the 4th. He goes in the 5th, right? Because there's also going to be injuries between now and August. And I think it's that pocket of the draft where you're actually gaining a ton of value on everybody else. Our late rounds are pretty tough right now, and our early round combos are already feeling kind of repetitive. But I think that middle pocket is where you're just not going to have access to those players at those prices. Now, I can't tell you which ones. I don't know that, but I have some guesses. But it's things are going to break, and new prices are going to come from that range.
And the other thing is, if you want to scratch the itch of going to get quote unquote rare combos, that's the beauty of these time box contests. Like, the golden's already filled. Right. You could go get a combo that no one else will probably have in there if you wanted to, and not necessarily be sacrificing as much. We are on the clock. Tons of quarterbacks available here, including Kyler. What do you think the way to go here is?
I think we grab a running back and a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Javonte, maybe?
Right,
or Mostert's fine. I don't take Mostert like ever, and I probably should.
I just put him in. Yeah, and a wide receiver. I agree.
Honestly, I'm sorry, buddy, but I think it's time for Curtis Samuel. I'm sorry to the guy.
We have the Buffalo stuff.
But we have the Buffalo stuff, yeah, and we need a receiver.
Yeah, I was going to push back if we didn't have the Kincaid, but I will. I'm a big fan of getting as many of these little stacks without the stack as possible. So I'll get a Curtis Samuel share here. Also, before I forget,
the Allen guy at the end of the on the other eye, on the other side. That's why I said sorry.
No, I mean, now we're forever intertwined with the 12 hole here. Pat, you guys have ADP Chasing today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, over on the Ship Chasing channel, and a special guest, Hayden Winks from Underdog, going to be swinging by. I'm looking forward to your guys' conversation, because I know Hayden has some of his ranks out, is differing from the market in some pretty big ways and spots. So should lead to an interesting conversation for you guys today.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see sort of Hayden's approach with the rankings, because I think there's kind of different philosophies to rankings. Mine are, I'm as much as possible trying to order the players in what the order in which I would draft these players on Underdog today. Their Underdog rankings, it's got it counts for ADP, it accounts for structure to some extent. It's, what would I do in a draft? Obviously as the draft moves on, they get a little more stale. We got to use our brains, but that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it. But you look at some other rankings and it's like, well, these are like the order in which I think the players are best. So I'm kind of curious to see where he's coming from on it. If it's like how close to drafting he would actually be, because you're going to have a lot of running backs in the early rounds if you draft right off Hayden Winks.
Yeah. And it's kind of a dilemma, in the extreme wide receiver avalanche eras and drafts. One thing I would always say is like, you are going to think the running back is the best value at almost every single round, just because all the wide receivers got pushed up. And so like each running back is like slipping 10 picks past ADP value as you go through the 6th, the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And so it's like, even though, Isaiah Pacheco falls 10 spots, it's like, are you going to like that? Or are you going to like Najee slipping 20 spots past ADP more? And then you start to do those 2v2s and it's like, all right, we will capitulate, or as you would say, try to ski with people in tandem with the avalanche instead of getting buried.
Yeah, and it makes any really like marginal early values look bad. You look back and you're like, yeah, I guess Josh Jacobs like 3 picks past ADP wasn't that great when I could have Pacheco, around after ADP or more.
Yeah.
Right, because we know that if you just look back at like what works, you can't overspend at running back. That doesn't mean you can't go running back, or even 3 straight running backs. It's tough in this environment to go 3 straight running backs, but I think it's doable. But you can't go 4 straight running backs. That's where I think you're probably just dead. Team's dead. Do something else. Hey, good news. I've got good news. A half an hour just freed up.
The other thing I'll say about that, and this goes back to, I made the video on the Deposit Kingdom channel about reverse engineering your draft. I think you need to have a very strong grasp on the late round wide receiver targets, or even mid to late round wide receiver targets you like to make that work, where you're basically saying, this is my safety net. I think Troy Franklin's undervalued by 2 rounds. Like, even just separating whether you're right or wrong, just knowing like this guy's going to be available for me. Josh Palmer is what makes these 3 early running back picks. Like, at least have that thesis in mind, because if you do just fly by the seat of your pants, scooping up values and don't have a plan, that's a recipe for really not liking your team. Whereas if you say, I think Jalen Polk is one of the most mispriced players, I can make this build work because I'm getting an extreme value, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. And to take it one step further, you should be targeting Justin Herbert. You should be targeting Drake May. You could potentially also be targeting Trevor Lawrence, because you can get Brian Robinson and Christian Kirk following 3 straight running back picks. So bet on those offenses to just be, 1, underpriced, and 2, going nuts in the fantasy playoffs. And that is a potential super team. You've got these really strong stacks with the quarterback, and the team's just being powered by these elites at the 2 running backs in the flex position, and the wide receiver positions are being easily filled by the quarterbacks. I think Drake May's actually a really good one there, because he's so cheap. You can get so many pieces, and you get Hunter Henry late, because this is a build where if you go elite tight end, or even if you go Engram, you just don't have much room to spare at wide receiver when you take 2 or 3 running backs early.
I did that exact combo in my draft. I did the George Kittle, Hunter Henry combo. Hunter Henry slid 20 picks past ADP, and I liked how that synced up. So we are getting the Trevor Lawrence snipe there is hilarious. The Brian Thomas, I should have seen that coming. We could do Brock with CMC if we want to just get one piece here.
I think that's what we do. Is Pearsall available?
Oh, that's a great call. Yeah, he is. Should probably
take him.
Yeah, 144 is exactly at ADP in this room. He's probably not coming back.
Yeah, he's not coming back. And who cares? It's like Jared Jeudy or we need
another
receiver.
I think that was and we get up to 6 wide receivers. I mean, we're actually kind of in good shape as far as our positions. Brock Purdy, CMC Mostert's a perfectly fine 2 running backs through 11, and then 6 wide receivers, Diggs, Neighbors, Kirk, Godwin, Samuel, Pearsall, the 2 tight ends, Kincaid, Ingram. And what is the kind of team you're okay with a Pearsall reach where he is your wide receiver 6, not your wide receiver 4?
Yep. By the way, I said Brian Robinson and Brian Thomas apparently. So the chat is...
they're roasting you for your sleep
deprived. Good. Yeah, I deserve it. Roast away.
Yeah, see, last year when Pat did this show, he would come on at 11 a.m. No, you came on at 10 a.m. Eastern, and now you come on at what's your
9
local time?
9 a.m. Pacific.
So you have a kid and you're an hour early by your typical sleep schedule.
That's right.
Yeah, I've been holding having to go to the bathroom here, just waiting till you finally woke up into peak vamping form. If I could leave you to your own devices.
Oh, I don't know. I think you better hold it, buddy. Oh wow, Pete really had to go to the bathroom. I told him I wouldn't be able to vamp, and he still left. All right, where did Jayden Daniels go? Because that was the other dude that we were considering. Oh my God. Okay, so he went in the 8th round. Ahead of Caleb Williams. I've kind of felt for a while that he probably should go there, but I've been wondering like who was going to lead the charge, because Jayden Daniels scares me a lot more than like Anthony Richardson scared me last year, just because he's so thin and he like runs to contact, and there's like a literal highlight reel of him getting blown up with, at the college level. So that's like, it's a little worrying, but the problem is that if he stays healthy, he's just going to easily pay off an 8th round price tag. So I've not been wanting to like really, really push Jayden Daniels above ADP and be like, we got to take Daniels in every draft. But if he moves up to here, I think I just kind of have him at ADP and take him wherever you guys tell me to take him. This is how I'm playing Daniels.
Do you really think, like, I know that Anthony Richardson is much, much bigger than him, but like, do you really think his injury risk probability is that much greater than Richardson or another running quarterbacks?
I guess the other thing I'd say is he's light, and he's not a Lamar level runner. His running was really strong by like just regular quarterback standards, but it wasn't like, oh my God, this guy is absolutely unstoppable as a runner. So I think he's probably going to be more of like a between the 20s type of dude. I think at the goal line, right, the size, his inability to actually avoid people, like he's just sort of fast in a straight line more than shifty. That's going to show up more at the goal line. So compared to Richardson in terms of like his rushing ability for touchdowns, I think is a pretty big difference. And then the injury risk part is just more of like a bad gut feeling I have than real analysis. So that's where I'm like, he's not someone I'm like comfortable being like, you got to take Jayden Daniels. But right, that's where I'm like, the feeling that I have of like, oh, he's pretty skinny, I'm just going to try to push down and take him wherever his ADP is. Like, we've been ahead of ADP on Daniels the whole way, and we probably will be, even if he moves up significantly. We'll be like, a pick or two ahead, because a rushing quarterback like that unlocks a lot of things in your build, and if he stays healthy, he's gonna be really nice. But I don't know. It's a sort of interesting thing where I don't really trust that part of it. Like, that part of the analysis is not something I'm putting a lot of stock in. It just makes me nervous.
Well, that's why for me, Kyler is the kind of the better comp, right? He weighs a similar amount to Kyler. They're not going to have Kyler like jumping over the line of scrimmage at the goal line to try to score. We've seen Kyler get hurt because of this, and yet we're still drafting Kyler well ahead of Jayden Daniels. So obviously we've seen Kyler play, so there's more certainty there. But that's kind of how I think about Jayden, is more that Kyler mold.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
All right, we are on the clock here. Feels like running back and wide receiver picks for us.
Yeah, I like Ty Chandler.
Yeah.
And then probably Polk.
Yeah, unless there's a running back riser that you want to grab here who's not going to come back. Some of these guys in the 160 range might not come back.
I think we push running back. We have CMC.
Yeah.
We need, having the potential second stack would be nice.
Okay, let's grab Polk. I'm trying to think if there were any other stacking stuff. Yeah, you got like the Jets. Yeah, let's grab Polk. So we are up to 7 wide receivers there. Third rookie. Here's the team real quick for since we've been bouncing around. Quarterback, Brock Purdy. Up to 3 running backs, CMC, Mostert, Ty Chandler. Up to 7 wide receivers, Diggs, Neighbors, Kirk, Godwin, Curtis Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Polk. And then our double tight end, Dalton Kincaid and Evan Ingram.
Yep. There's a comment here. Jayden Daniels runs like if Lamar tried to imitate Mahomes running.
I've tried to picture that in my head.
Yeah,
that's our guy, David. He's a ship chaser as well. I like that.
Yeah, but I mean, like I don't. Daniels rates pretty well in my stuff. He's not as well as Richardson did, but and not as well as Kyler did, but good. And he's pretty well priced, even if he were to settle in the 8th round. That's not bad for pocket passer. He's the number 2 overall pick. He has some weapons. He's with a quarterback or a coach who is used to mobile quarterbacks. A coach who actually does design good running games. So he probably will do some pretty interesting stuff with Daniels as a runner. And they actually, Brian Robinson, who actually mean Brian Robinson this time, I think is a pretty decent downhill runner. We'll see what if Eckler can add to that backfield this year. So he's in a decent enough setup. He's just not a guy I've been able to get as excited about as I expected to, is basically what it is.
Yeah, I loaded up early. I think I mentioned he's my most drafted player across positions right now. I just thought he was going to be just an obvious riser. And I've cut one other thing I noticed is I like Kyler. I don't have that much Kyler. I think I've only taken him in 1 or 2 drafts because of kind of really liking some of the other options in that draft range. And so my kind of thought too was it might be hard for me to get on Daniels when he is going closer to there. And this is one thing I try to get better about this year is really hammering a guy that I think might be harder for me to click later. And Jayden has certainly fit that bill. But on the flip side, it's Anthony Richardson got super expensive last year and I was out, and then he pushed way back and you could get him in the hundreds, a lot toward the end of the year.
Yeah. I don't know which camp Daniels will fall in. I mean, he won the Heisman. Right. I mean, I remember the college football crowd was kind of what are we doing with Anthony Richardson? This dude barely played. And it was kind of the NFL and the less college football you watched and the more NFL you watched, the more into Anthony Richardson you seem to be. And I don't know. I think I don't have a great sense of it, but it seems like that's not the case with Daniels, where, the dude's just coming off an awesome season. Maybe August drafters will like him a little bit more.
So we have 14, 15, 16, 5 more picks here. We can see, I think, I like your call to have waited on running back. It seems like a lot of the guys we would have been interested in taking there have made it all the way back. There's only been 3 running back selections since we had our picks at the 12-13 turn. Quite the fall for Jared Goff, all the way at 164 here. Cade Otton.
Is that with the Amon-Ra? Is that the Amon-Ra drafter?
Yeah.
Wow. And Laporta. And he pushed it. Laporta. Wow,
that's
dude.
Sick.
Congrats.
I love
That's
that.
Awesome.
We are going to like the running back we get here. This worked out well. So Algier, Gibson, and Bucky are all here.
Gibson and Bucky, we have stacks set up.
Stacks with both of them?
With both of them.
Yep. And then just thinking it through, are there any other quarter. I guess we still have the Daniel Jones if we really needed. Baker went, right? Yeah, Baker went. That's a slight. So it does kind of push us more towards a Drake May thing. And are we comfortable with a 2-quarterback Drake May build? That's, I think, up for debate.
We could go May and Daniels.
May and who?
Or Daniel Jones.
I was like, if Jayden Daniels,
if someone's been talked about,
I'm on board.
If someone's been talked about and they have a similar name to another guy, I'm just gonna call them that guy. That's it. The brain is not firing on all cylinders here.
There's the rookie wall. There's the rookie dad wall. Pat's pushing through it right now.
Can we see the Amon-Ra team again? Because I'm curious about
it. I was going to also bring this up as you talk about this. I have now seen Amon-Ra. He has gone top 5 in 3 of my past 4 Best Ball Mania drafts that I've done. I'm like, is this a new trend?
Well, I think he's ranked that way in ETR. I think ETR.
Oh, then that would do it.
Yeah. So I've been wondering if we were going to see that flip, but let's see. I'm pretty sure they have him 5th. They do. Yeah.
Okay. That's where my answer is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take him over Justin Jefferson for sure. But I think if you're like, I'm just always taking him over Bijan and Breece, I get it.
Yeah, I don't get it if you're drafting now. Like, and I've even talked about this with Leone, right? Because you're saying you're going to have 0% of those guys. Or maybe a smattering if they fall to like 1.9 or 1.10. But you're going to have 0% if you're taking Amon-Ra over them every single time at that spot.
Well, I think the ADP, I think he's going to just flip them. And then so you just take Amon-Ra at 6. You can get Bijan at 7 and Breece at 9. Or Breece at 8, sorry.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if it does force the ADP to flip, I just think if you're drafting this early and you plan to draft a lot of teams, man, unless you're making like a super conscious stand, which I don't know if I would with ARSB over those guys. I don't know. It just seems obvious to me to kind of draft it at ADP and get exposure to all of those guys. But
I do too. But I think ETR has the advantage where they're like, no, it should be Amon-Ra here. And I'm like, okay, fine. Then it's on, right. And it is. It's not like a bad take. It's just, to me, if like the order of those guys doesn't really matter that much, and so tell me the order, and then I will take them in that order to try to have exposure to all of them.
Yeah. All right, we did see a running back run there. We took Gibson in Bucky, then Algier, Dobbins, Chuba, Roshan, Tracy. I want to get your thoughts on Gibson. I touched on him for just a second in my first draft because I took Ramondre, who I called like maybe one of the least talked about top 100 players. I just feel like there hasn't been much Ramondre discussion. How are you thinking about this backfield?
Yeah, I think Gibson and Ramondre are both like solid enough. Gibson's always been he was not liked by the previous coaching staff, it seems like. You know, they wanted J.D. McKissick to come back. They played him over him in passing situations when he was converted wide receiver. They very quickly were like, yes, Brian Robinson's what we've been looking for, even though he was like a pretty uninspiring prospect, was coming off a gunshot wound to his leg and was still getting work above Gibson pretty early on on early downs. So that all makes me nervous, but like efficiency wise, Gibson's been like pretty solid. And Ramondre hasn't been horrendous. He hasn't been that great. Last year was pretty bad, but so I'm kind of just like, I'm not taking Ramondre a ton because he's not my favorite guy there. I am taking more Gibson just because of prices. So you're like, these two running backs who are kind of interesting because they're versatile. They have size. They could theoretically both kind of be 3-down guys, but with Gibson, if he's a 3-down guy, it's probably because Ramondre is not playing. And it's not like they have a ton of depth there in New England. So I take more Gibson because he's just so much cheaper.
Yeah, I think they definitely fall into that bucket of backfield where I want exposure to both. in that they both could easily pay off ADP. If it is just a condensed 2-person backfield, I think they both could. And then there are some pretty outsized gains available there if one of them is really separated from the other. And not to mention, we're hopefully getting a quarterback boost, like the best quarterback that, Ramondre has, played with, hopefully. Like that's the other part of this.
Yeah, that's God, you're right, because he's been just in the Mac Jones zone, in the Zappy zone.
So we do have we're about to pick here at the turn 1572. Drake May is definitely needs to be part of this team.
For sure.
The question is, do we want to set up maybe another stack for the 18th round? Do we want to grab a second quarterback or a third quarterback now? What do you think?
If we're going to grab Daniel Jones, I think we should just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the opportunity cost? Like, who are we going to pick if not Jones?
Right. It would have been like, do you want to try to go like Adam Thielen and Bryce Young, which I think I know the answer to that. In positionally, like we're fine at running back, like CMC is going to hold it down with these guys. We got to our 7 wide receivers. We're good at tight end. I do think we kind of had a luxury pick here as far as an 8th wide receiver or a 3rd quarterback. And like you said, I'm not seeing anything at wide receiver.
No. And what we can do with the 18th round pick is grab a Giant or a Patriot, and the room can decide on who that is. But there's so many dudes that we'll get one. So we'll just double stack one of these guys with 2 pass catchers.
And I will say, like, are we going to do two uncertain quarterback situations make one certain situation? I don't know, but like Drake May and Daniel Jones are not guys I would feel comfortable with in a 2 quarterback build right now. But if we're kind of stacking their uncertainty together and saying, maybe Daniel Jones gets benched at the end of the season, maybe Drake May's not playing at the beginning of the season.
That's exactly what we're doing.
It comes together for a full quarterback. That's the play.
This is one quarterback. But it's a quarterback with mobility who plays. Now this quarterback is coming off a knee injury to start the season, so that's not ideal. And the other half of the quarterback is playing behind Jacoby Brissett, so that's not the best. But and then half the quarterback's getting benched for Drew Lock at the end of the season. But the other half of the quarterback is going to be going nuts because Drake May has a super fun skill set for fantasy, and he's going to pass Jacoby Brissett fairly soon. Number 3 overall pick. These dudes wouldn't trade down. The Vikings were offering like 3 first-rounders. They wouldn't come down off number 3. They're not playing Jacoby Brissett over him for very long. There might be a couple games here, guys. But it would be such. It would make me very extremely upset if they wouldn't trade him to the Vikings, who would have started him every single week this year, just to bench him behind Jacoby Brissett. I'm not going to take that well.
Otherwise, we will go to Netflix and say, "Hey, can we host the roast of Jared Mayo for benching Drake May for 14 games?" We'll get up there on the dais.
Could have had 3 first-round picks. I don't care if you play the guy or not. Just take the picks or the player. You got to pick one.
Yeah,
I'm already tilted.
Man, there's nothing I know New England wants more than to just play Jacoby Brissett. They're so excited about it too. There was an article I linked to in the Fantasy Life newsletter this morning. By the way, make sure you guys are subscribed over there. Free newsletter. I write it a few times a week, and it was an Athletic article. I will pull it up, but the title just cracked me up. It was like where we're at in fantasy football. Look at this title: a minute-by-minute look at Drake May's first public practice. Minute by minute, Pat. We can't even review the practice on the whole. What he was doing down to the minute.
People eat this up. That's why. I mean, they've done stuff like this where the guy just follows around one player. To me, this is like the content I enjoy the least. I'm just like, just tell me who's like running ahead between like Javon Baker and Kendrick Bourne. Like that's what I want to know. Don't tell me what Drake May, like, the Drake May was over talking to Jalen Polk about routes. Cool. don't care.
There was, I think the New England beat reporter game is like pretty much on sicko mode. I remember, aren't they the ones who each year they have a guy who manually charts air yards at practice?
That's right. But that has been misleading because there was one year where Damian Harris was supposed to catch a bunch of passes. Remember, he's tracking running back targets, and Damian Harris had like 11 running back targets one day. We're like, it's happening. And then, no, what's not in fact happening. They do drills and they try stuff out in practice.
Oh my God. Yeah, the guy up in the tree. I think I'm going to try to make my way down to Patriots training camp at some point this year. Maybe we can record a little bit video. I can be the guy in the tree with the binoculars charting air yards.
Dude, you please chart from a tree.
That's it. I'm going to do millisecond by millisecond Drake May analysis.
You're going to have to break down the film.
So is Darius Slayton? I mean, or did you have another deep New England
that was it.
Guy?
Okay. Yeah.
Kendrick Bourne, Osborne.
Actually, I would say Kendrick Bourne over Slayton. Our bet is more on May at the end of the season. So I think it makes more sense to break ties to the Patriots.
Okay. There is like you were saying, like the Giants and Patriots, man, there is a log jam there at pass catcher. The market has sorted it accordingly, and I don't even think it's sorted in an insane way, but there is room for some of these other guys to be just as relevant as the 15th round picks.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Patriots would probably be my pick for offense that absolutely smashes at zero cost, right? Kind of your Texans from last year. You get the rookie quarterback, you get a guy, I think a quarterback who's getting slept on a little bit in terms of how talented he actually is. You're getting the stink, who has more stink on them from last year, because that's the part people forget with the Texans is like Texans. It was the Texans, dude. He's on the Texans. Robert Wood. We're talking about drafting Robert Woods. Like this team
read a great thread about him.
Yeah, there's a great thread about Robert Woods. Check it out. But this is bad. And then it's like, oh, actually, when a quarterback is, CJ Stroud, Noah Brown, Robert Woods is still dead, but Noah Brown can score points. Like this, a great quarterback elevates. And New England's probably like that's a worse situation than Stroud was in, but that is, we're moving from just an absolute disaster of the last couple of years, just kind of the franchise melting down a little bit to potentially them finding their footing with Drake May. And so the swing from what they were to what they could be is about as wide as I really see. So, who knows? It could all end in tears, but you're able to get May plus several of his pass catchers. And because we don't have certainty about who the guys are, you can kind of like experiment and, mix and match and build different Drake May stacks. And if it May ends up being the guy, you should have, some version of the guys you want alongside him.
And you know what else to that point that's going to be super fun with these Giants and more specifically the Patriots? This is going to be where those ownership projections are going to come in really handy in August specifically, because we're going to look and you're going to see Javon Baker, Jalen Polk, 100% ownership, KJ Osborne, 4% or something along those lines.
Yeah. No, and that's, Sacrilegious has been on KJ Osborne. He at one point described himself as KJ Osborne pilled. Sounds like I'm not sure how that happened. I didn't even know that was
a pill that was available to buy.
That pill's not on the market. He made it himself. But that's like a great point. Like Osborne doesn't get drafted most of the time, and it's possible he's the answer. Someone in the chat, Stepfather, said Kendrick Bourne and Robert Woods' Spider-Man pointing meme. That is a little too similar now that you mentioned it. They're coming off the ACL. Yeah. But yeah, it could be Baker, or Baker could be a day 3 pick who doesn't really play, right? Polk is a pretty safe bet to be out there, but who knows how good he is. It could be Hunter Henry, right? It could just be that May just feeds Hunter Henry because these receivers aren't good. There's a number of ways that this could go. It could be, that the running backs are smash values, kind of like Devin Singletary was, right? Devin Singletary was an awesome value last year because Stroud was so good. So I think that's where Gibson becomes more interesting. That's where Ramondre could still be interesting because, he's pretty well priced for a lead back. So there's lots of Patriots. There's not a single Patriot where I'm like, oh, It's a lot to pay.
Right. I agree. Real quick before I do a final recap on this team, my guy Sam Sherman will be hosting ADP Chasing later today. Sam Berman from Underdog, he has the running emojis here. We're going to have the official announcement about Underdog Cardio Club for 2024 is going to be dropping at 2 p.m. Eastern today. Make sure you guys are following the @Underdog Drafts account on X. That's where the announcement will be. I will be sure to tweet that out as well, but excited to show you guys what they have cooked up for this year. And it's going to be a great summer of cardio and drafting. Some fun additions to the mix this year. Pat, let's recap this team before we get out of here. 3-5-8-2 build. Talked a lot about these three quarterbacks: Brock Purdy, Drake May, Daniel Jones. Got that anchor CMC build with Mostert, who it doesn't sound like either of us have drafted a ton. I like that we got him here. Ty Chandler, Antonio Gibson, and Bucky Irving. You kept us on track at wide receiver, even when it doesn't feel good. Getting guys like Christian Kirk, Curtis Samuel, Chris Godwin, I think really kept this one on pace. So Diggs, Neighbors, Kirk, Godwin, Curtis Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, Polk, and Kendrick Bourne. And then our double tight end, Dalton Kincaid, Evan Ingram. Pretty good positionally. Some nice stacks there. Maybe not all of our favorite player selections, but I think it came together.
I think it came together. We pushed it at wide receiver a little bit, but kind of like every round we kind of took our medicine at wide receiver, and then we stayed like barely on track. And then we ended up kind of going overweight in the early double-digit rounds, getting Pearsall up to wide receiver 6 there. So I feel good about wide receiver. I think we stayed on track kind of barely, but we did. And then at running back, we pushed it, but no one punished us. So we got Mostert a little bit behind ADP, Ty Chandler, slight reach forward, but we got Gibson coming back, Bucky Irving there, feels nice. So like no major values, but we often like kind of did other things rather than prioritizing running back, which I think is the right way to play with CMC. And yeah, I mean, I like the double elite tight end, or I guess this is sort of a traditional, like what you might call bully tight end, but like you're getting a price on Kincaid, where Kincaid we end up feeling like should have been going in the second. And then Ingram, you feel like, should have been going in the fourth or fifth, where both guys are underpriced. So I'm more interested in that type of build than I have been in years past.
The other thing I love about this team, and I was mentioning it a lot in my first draft, it's like been the priority thing for me in these pre-schedule drafts specifically, and something I mentioned in the week 16 versus 17 video of like, what is something we can accomplish that's not mutually exclusive to a specific round, as in a bring back game stack. It is just having as much correlation as possible, even if it's not with the quarterback. So even outside of our San Francisco, New England, and Giants stacks, we also have a Tampa Bay stack. We also have a Buffalo stack. We also have a Jacksonville stack. We essentially got 6 stacks on a 3 quarterback team, so we can enjoy the variance of maybe 2 of these offenses go off in 15, 2 go in 16, 2 go in 17. Like that's in our perfect world how this could play out, having so much team level correlation.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how powerful this is. This is super powerful because you don't have a ton of need at quarterback. You have to fill one quarterback slot. Okay. Now keep in mind what's happening. You're in week 16. Your team's really good. So filling a quarterback slot, you only drafted 2 or 3 all season, has not really been a huge problem for you. You've got a quarterback who's doing pretty well. You've got a couple quarterbacks who are doing really well. So the quarterback, you're going to need to have someone have a good game in week 16, but quarterback doesn't tend to separate like the other positions. So maybe you don't have the quarterback 1 on the week, and maybe the quarterback 1 on the week is a guy you stacked without the quarterback, but can you cover that score enough, right? Can you get within 6 points of the score at quarterback? Now let's say you have 2 pieces hitting your lineup from someone else's quarterback. Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are both hitting your lineup. You've gotten a tight end score out of that and a really good wide receiver score. That is hard to find. If you by one move you can cover, the flex and tight end, okay, that's a big deal. Like we need to assemble a lot of scores at wide receiver in particular. But the skill position players, we need a bunch of guys to hit our lineup. And so betting on Jacksonville, just making that bet Jacksonville, and you get 2-3 guys and you know, those 3 guys, but none of them is the quarterback, is huge. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, there's a direct example from last year. Think about this being the absolute nuts. You have Amari Cooper and David Njoku without the quarterback. The quarterback wasn't playing there. No one knew to draft Joe Flacco. Amari goes absolutely nuclear in 16. Njoku goes nuclear in 17. Bada bing, bada boom. That correlation, you were right. That offense was better than expected. It was just happening in a way we never could have envisioned during drafting season.
Or how about Fareed, who won, as you pointed out in your video on week 16, which is awesome. People should check that out. That was really, really, really cool. Week 16 correlation with, or week 16 and 17, because that's the other thing, to your point, like this follows you through every week, so you don't got to worry about bringing it back or whatever. You just have the Lions. Fareed had the Lions. He didn't have Goff. He had Amon-Ra Laporta, didn't have Goff. Not having Goff was not a problem. In fact, it was Jordan Love going off in the night game with Jayden Reed, who let's say he takes Goff. Does he take Jayden Reed? Jayden Reed was the dude he needed. So by like pushing it at the quarterback and then building out additional correlation, he had more upside in his lineup. He had the Lions stuff, but he also had the Packers stuff. He needed both.
And it ends up being like a win-win situation, right? Because you either push that first quarterback in the room, just slaps you in the face with it and says, take Jared Goff 40 picks past ADP, like the drafter here today got, or you build out even more stacks because you are continually stacking even when you miss out on that quarterback. And that's why in that first draft, I'm letting Brock Purdy go 30 picks past ADP. I have all of these options to build out more and more stacks. And it's a really freeing thing because then you're getting ADP value too. When it comes, and then you can kind of pick your spots. All right, sometimes I will grab this guy as the faller. Sometimes I'll just keep building out stacks.
Yeah, I think like the correlation is probably more important. Like if you have a wide receiver, another wide receiver from that same team is maybe a bigger deal than getting the quarterback, right? Like at a certain point, and I was kind of curious to see that Goff team, like what he was getting by pushing that. Like I saw he took Musgrave ahead. Did he have other Packers? Because that's where like I probably just grabbed Goff where he took Musgrave, unless he was building out a Green Bay thing on top of it.
Let me pull this up.
I think at some point you're risking someone blowing up your team, which is fine if you're kind of building out something else.
Yeah, see, they had a Green Bay stack with Jayden Reed. Yeah,
so that was exactly how to play it. Then he played it perfectly.
Right, because this team doesn't necessarily need 3 quarterbacks with Caleb and Jordan Love, but Jared Goff at 164 starts to make a lot of sense. We did that with Aaron Rodgers in our ship chasing draft where he came at 200, where it's like, we don't need this guy, but man, at that price.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, you get rewarded for pushing Goff there.
Yeah. All right, dudes, blast as always. This is Best Ball Breakfast here every Monday morning, kickoff drafts at 10 a.m. I think I might even do a couple extra drafts next week. I want to reach out to some other guests too, because we're going to have the schedule. We're all going to be wanting to correlate the hell out of our teams. But at the very least, myself, Sean, Pat, drafting next Monday, might even squeeze in a couple after that. Pat, let people know what's going on at Leg Up here.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. As I mentioned, you get $50 in underdog credit if you sign up for a yearly subscription. It's $99 a year. Legendaryupside.com/legup-perks. I'm going to just change that to legendaryupside.com/perks. Make it easy on everybody. But yeah, the details on that. And most importantly, I need you to fill out a form so that I have your underdog username because that's how you get the credit. But yeah, we've got articles going up on the site. We got an article coming up this week from Sacrilegious on his diversification percentiles that he wrote part 1 on about, which is free on the site a couple weeks ago. I kind of built on that idea with an article about Central American Tree last week. You can check that out. Steph Miller's got a dynasty, like a dynasty startup guide that she's working on. We're going to have that out soon. As I mentioned, FFPC rankings are launching soon. And then we are going to do drafters. I don't know exactly when on the timing, but we are going to launch drafters rankings as well. So we got some exciting stuff over Legendary Upside.
Awesome. Yeah. And don't forget 3:30 p.m. Eastern today over on the Ship Chasing channel, ADP Chasing, special guest Hayden Winks swinging by. That is going to be great. Might try to get the club going tomorrow. Maybe we'll do like an eliminator draft or something like that. Mix it up here before the schedule drops.
Nice.
Swolecast off and on the clock should be back this Wednesday. We've been doing Ship Chasing on Thursdays in the afternoon. That'll be 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'll have another video out on the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel. I think I'm going to do, there was a trend, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter over the weekend, Pat, where everyone was just listing their 3 favorite values at each position right now.
I saw Davis list his, but I didn't realize it was a trend.
It was, I mean, Davis is only capitalizing on a trend there. So I might put mine in video form. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel for that. But yeah, going to be a fun week getting the schedule in. And thank you guys all for hanging out in the chat. Appreciate all of you guys. And thanks again to our guests, Shawn and Pat, as always. I'm Pete. We'll see you guys next time on Best Ball Breakfast. Have a good one.